Clotheshorse is brought to you with support from the following sustainable brands. Selena Sanders, a social impact brand that specializes in upcycled clothing using only reclaimed, vintage, or thrifted materials from tea towels, linens, blankets, and quilts. Sustainably crafted in Los Angeles, each piece is designed to last in one's closet for generations to come. Maximum style, minimal carbon footprint. Picnic Wear, a slow fashion brand made by hand in New York City from vintage and deadstock textiles. Picnic Wear strives for minimal waste but maximum authenticity. Future vintage over future garbage. Find Picnic Wear on Instagram at Picnic Wear, and that's Wear, W-E-A-R, and at www.picnicwear.com. No Flight Back Vintage, bringing fun new life to old things. Always using recycled and secondhand materials to make dope-ass shit for dope-ass people. See more on Instagram at No Flight Back Vintage. Shift Clothing out of beautiful Astoria, Oregon, with a focus on natural fibers, simple hardworking designs, and putting fat people first. Discover more at shiftwheeler.com. Late to the Party, creating one-of-a-kind statement clothing from vintage, salvaged, and thrifted textiles. They hope to tap into the dreamy memories we all hold. Floral curtains, a childhood dress, the wallpaper in your best friend's rec room, all while creating modern, sustainable garments that you'll love wearing and have for years to come. Late to the Party is passionate about celebrating and preserving textiles, the memories they hold, and the stories they have yet to tell. Check them out on Instagram at Late to the Party People. Vino Vintage, based just outside of LA. We love the hunt of shopping secondhand because you never know what you might find. Catch us at flea markets around Southern California by following us on Instagram at vino.vintage so you don't miss our next event. Gabriella Antonis is a visual artist and an ethical trade fashion designer. But Gabriella is also a radical feminist micro-business. She's the one-woman band trying to help you understand why slow fashion is what the earth needs. The one-woman band to help you build your own brand. She can take your fashion line from just a concept and do your sketches, pattern making, grading, sourcing, cutting, and sewing. The second option is for those who aren't trying to start a business and who just want ethical garments. Gabriella Antonis will create custom made-to-measure garments just for you. Her goal is to help one person of any size at a time, including beyond size 40. To inquire about this serendipitous intersectional offering of either concept, DM her on Instagram to book a consultation. Please follow her on Instagram and Twitter at Gabriella Antonis. And that's Gabriella with one L. Gotta get that spelling right. Dylan Page is an online clothing and lifestyle brand based out of St. Louis, Missouri. Our products are chosen with intention for the conscious community. Everything we carry is animal-friendly, ethically made, sustainably sourced, and cruelty-free. Dylan Page is for those who never stop questioning where something comes from. We know that personal experience dictates what's sustainable for you, and we are here to help guide and support you to make choices that fit your needs. Check us out at dylanpage.com and find us on Instagram at dylanpagelifeandstyle. Salt Hats, purveyors of truly sustainable hats, hand-blocked, sewn, and embellished in Detroit, Michigan. Find us on Instagram at Salt Hats. Karen Kinney Studio. Located in Western Massachusetts, Karen specializes in handcrafted earrings from found, upcycled, and repurposed fabrics, as well as other eco-friendly curios, all with a hint of nostalgia, a dollop of whimsy, a dash of color, and 100% fun. Karen is an artist/designer who believes the materials we use matter. See more on Instagram at Karen Kinney Studio or online at www.ckinney.com. Gentle Vibes Vintage. We are purveyors of polyester and psychedelic relics. We encourage experimentation and play not only in your wardrobe, but in your home too. We have thousands of killer vintage pieces ready for their next adventure. See them all on Instagram at Gentle Vibes Vintage. Thumbprint is Detroit's only fair trade marketplace, located in the historic Eastern Market. Our small business specializes in products handmade by empowered women in South Africa, making a living wage, creating things they love like hand-painted candles and ceramics. We also carry a curated assortment of sustainable and natural locally made goods. Thumbprint is a great gift destination for both the special people in your life and for yourself. Browse our online store at thumbprintdetroit.com and find us on Instagram at thumbprintdetroit. Blank Cass, or Blanket Coats by Cass, is focused on restoring, renewing, and reviving the history held within vintage and heirloom textiles. By embodying the love, craft, and energy that is original to each vintage textile as I transfer it into a new garment, I hope we can reteach ourselves to care for and mend what we have and make it last. Blank Cass lives on Instagram at _Cass, and a website will be launched soon at blankcass.com. Located in Whistler, Canada, Velvet Underground is a velvet jungle full of vintage and secondhand clothing, plants, a vegan cafe, and lots of rad products from other small sustainable businesses. Our mission is to create a brand and community dedicated to promoting self-expression, as well as educating and inspiring a more sustainable and conscious lifestyle, both for the people and the planet. Find us on Instagram at shop_velvetunderground or online at www.shopvelvetunderground.com. St. Evens is a New York City-based vintage shop that is dedicated to bringing you those special pieces you'll reach for again and again. More than just a store, St. Evens is dedicated to sharing the stories and history behind the garments. 10% of all sales are donated to a different charitable organization each month. For the month of August, St. Evens is supporting the Women's Prison Association, empowering women to redefine their lives in the face of injustice and incarceration. New vintage is released every Thursday at wearstevens.com with previews of new pieces and more, brought to you on Instagram at wear_st.evens. That's Wear St. Evens. Country Feedback is a mom and pop record shop in Tarboro, North Carolina. They specialize in used rock, country, and soul and offer affordable vintage clothing and housewares. Do you have used records you want to sell? Country Feedback wants to buy them. Find us on Instagram at Country Feedback Vintage and Vinyl, or head down east and visit our brick and mortar. All are welcome at this inclusive and family-friendly record shop in the country. Republica Unicornia Yarns, handmade yarn and notions for the color obsessed, made with love and some swearing in fabulous Atlanta, Georgia by head yarn wench Kathleen. Get ready for rainbows with a side of giving a damn. Republica Unicornia is all about making your own magic using small batch, responsibly sourced, hand-dyed yarns and thoughtfully made notions. Slow fashion all the way down and discover the joy of creating your very own beautiful hand-knit, crocheted, or woven pieces. Find us on Instagram at Republica_Unicornia_yarns and at www.republicaunicornia.com. Welcome to Clotheshorse, the podcast that has always, and still does, loved a good department store restaurant. Seriously, even if the food isn't that great, doesn't it make you feel kind of like a fancy lady who lunches? Not that I've been in one for a long time, but still, it's a good feeling to eat in one. I'm your host, Amanda, and this is episode 94. And it's a little treat for all of you who enjoy some good nostalgia, but like some good educational nostalgia. Throughout most of the pandemic, when most of us were home and isolated, worried and lonely, I worked hard to release 2 episodes per week. Do you remember those times? They weren't that long ago, actually. I did this mostly because I was also at home and I was worried and lonely and isolated, and working on the podcast helped me cope with my own mental health issues. I know for some of you, it was too much content. You probably got a little burned out. And when summer arrived, that hot vax summer that we were all so excited about, I pulled back to an average of like 1 episode per week because I too had big plans for hot vax summer and even hotter vax fall. Well, now it turns out that super fun hot vax summer was, well, more of a hot vax month, a few weeks. And I, like a lot of you, remain at home and lonely, pretty depressed, as I wait for things to get better so I can safely resume my life too. I'm depressed. I'm disappointed. I have found myself crying a lot more over the past few weeks as I confront the knowledge that all of the big plans I had for the fall to finally see family and friends, to get out into the world, to travel, which is for me one of life's greatest pleasures, all of that is back on hold. And I'm also being, just like you, bombarded with more and more bad, tragic, scary news every day. It's a lot. And so I've been really trying to take time each day to find some comfort somewhere. And I have found myself more and more comforting myself with nostalgic pop culture content, from reading young adult books that I loved as a kid to watching movies and shows that remind me of a happier time in life. I thought some of you might be in the mood for the same kind of thing. So Jenny of Late to the Party, aka the estate sale queen, dropped by so we could record a long, meandering conversation about the history of department stores, including our own memories, some detours into Mannequin, the film, Mad Men, and bad bathrooms, and so much more. So please listen, enjoy, and tell me all of your department store memories via the Clotheshorse hotline or by recording a message on your phone or computer and emailing it to me. You'll find all that contact info in the show notes. All right, let's jump right in. Jenny, I know everyone knows you by now, but we have been getting some new listeners who maybe won't start from the beginning. So do you want to just reintroduce yourself to everyone?
Sure. I'm Jenny. I am the founder of Late to the Party, a slow fashion brand. I do a lot of clothing and accessories made from vintage, thrifted, salvaged materials. Also a regular on the pod. I've come on and talked about everything from like estate sales and thrifting to weird pop culture nostalgia moments. It's like some of my favorite stuff to chat about. So yeah, I'm excited to be here today and chat about the rise and fall of the department store, which sounds very exciting. I'm really excited about this one.
I don't know what it is, but I was like, when you were talking about like, what episode would we like to do together? I was like, department stores felt like the right fit. Because I was like, I know Jenny's got some department store stories.
I do.
And we both grew up in the same time with the same kind of families. We like department stores were a part of our lives, which, I mean, I would love to hear from like Gen Z people. Like, do you even know what a department store is? Do you care? Have you ever been to one?
Totally. I was thinking about that, how like kind of weird it is, because when we talked about it, I was like, oh, that'll be fun to like, I was thinking a lot about malls too, but like, just department stores in general. I was like, well, what am I going to talk about? And then I started thinking, and there's actually like a lot of weird sort of like early inspo and moments in my life that are like surrounded or somehow influenced by department stores, which is actually really weird to think about now, because I've like probably haven't been in a department store in like a minute,
yeah.
Like I can't remember the last time I like was like, hey, let me head to the department store and like do some shopping, So it's just funny to think how much my life has changed from that. But
I know. I mean, doesn't the department store seem like a vintage idea? Like
totally.
Old timey. But there was a time when department stores were like the most innovative thing out there. I mean,
yeah.
I went down an exciting rabbit hole of research. So I'm really excited to wow you with what I learned about department stores.
I can't wait.
So department stores arrived on the scene in the 19th century in major cities, and like major major innovation in how people shopped. All around the same time, department stores were popping up in London with Whiteley's, in Paris, that's La Bon Marche, and in New
Mm.
York with Stewart's, literally a store I've never heard of. Have you ever heard of Stewart's?
No, I thought you were going to say like Bonwit Teller or something.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
See, I was shocked by this. There's a lot of arguing out there among historians about which department store was first, but it seemed like everyone kind of got the idea at the same time. And that's because it was the Industrial Revolution. More and more people were moving away from the country, from that rural farm life, and into the city. And their shopping habits changed, or really kind of like began. Because before that, you would just shop for things you needed. Like it was really about essentials. And often it was more like raw materials to make the essentials that you needed, right? Not a full dress, but some fabric to make a dress, that kind of thing.
Right.
This was also the beginning of the rise of gift-giving culture. Like back last year, I don't know if I did an episode about this or I just talked about it on Instagram, but I talked about the rise of like the Christmas shopping season, the holiday shopping season. And this is when this started to develop. Like, believe it or not, before the Industrial Revolution, people might give each other some like trinkets or some candy for Christmas or something, like only your like family, you know, like your close relatives.
Right.
But this turned into like, no, I got to get a gift for everyone. And it's got to be a pre-made gift. And it's got to be a special gift. And there's got to be lots of gifts, you know. So this is like where this starts to pick up momentum. And the department store is a really big part of it because the department store changed the way we shop forever. And it's really hard to put on your hat, your like time traveling hat, and be like, oh, this is a time when department stores are so innovative. Because you and I would look at them now, and we'll talk about this later, but I feel like department stores are just such a relic and like not cool. Right. You know, whenever they try to do something cool, it's like a year too late. Yeah. You know what I mean? They're just always.
Well, it's interesting that you're saying that, like, you know, they started sort of being the like gift giving and that kind of thing, and kind of this general place where you could buy like gifts for everybody and all the things you know, the things you need or don't need or whatever. Because I feel like we've gone back to like niche sort of shopping where it's like, oh, I need a bra, I'm going to the bra place, or I'm gonna now. I feel like we've kind of gone back to that because of like online, and you can just directly find like, I need to find sneakers, I'm gonna go to the sneaker place, versus department stores were like this general sort of like almost social kind of place you could go and sort of look and find what you needed because you didn't have that. That's where you found the fashion, right? Found the things, which is so weird to think about now.
Everything.
Yeah.
Like in the early like decades of the department store, you could literally buy everything there, from mouse traps to clothes to gloves to fabric to food. I mean, just like everything was there, right? And some department stores like still operate that way where you could buy just about anything. Like there's a chain of department stores out here in central Pennsylvania called Boscov's. And I believe they were started by someone outside of Philadelphia who had the last name Boskov. And they always feel really old timey to me because like you can get clothes there and makeup and shoes, like all the things we think of as a department store, but they also have a candy counter, you know, and like tools and home goods and like just everything.
Right.
What you almost might think of more like a Target or a Walmart having now. And it's important to call out that places like Target and Walmart aren't really considered department stores.
What category would you put them in then?
They're considered, it's weird to me, but a lot of like retail analysts put them more in the category of like discount shopping, which I don't know. It's a
bit of a stretch.
It's a bit of a stretch, but a lot of the like categories in retail are really antiquated. And we'll talk about some of those as we go through this too. 'Cause, like, in my experience as a buyer, a lot of the industry still hasn't even adapted to the way people shop now. And so you still deal with some of this like antiquated thinking when you go to meet brands and stuff like that. So previously, before the Industrial Revolution, just to reiterate, the average person made a lot of their own stuff, like clothing, buying the fabrics and other items from local mom and pop shops. You know, you're going to get a pair of shoes and you're going to wear them for years, right? And you have one pair of shoes. Like this is the time. No one's shopping just for funsies.
Right.
Which is a hard idea to even wrap my head around as a kid who grew up going to the mall just for fun, you know?
Right. Totally.
And you certainly, as the average consumer, didn't expect to go into a store that sold clothes and perfumes and gloves and home goods. You would go to like a general store and they might have fabric and flour and soap, but like it wasn't like a glamorous situation, right? You didn't go there for the fashion. You didn't go there for
Right.
the vibes, right?
Right. Right.
Also, now this was really interesting to me. In the pre-department store era, most shopping was done via barter. So
Mm.
if you went to the general store, you could negotiate, haggle your price.
Right.
They weren't going to be like, all flour is $1 a pound for everyone. It was like you could
Right.
negotiate, you could trade, you could work something out. Department stores were different because they had fixed prices. So you couldn't go into Stewart's, this department store neither of us have ever heard of, and be like, I see that you're trying to sell these gloves for $2, but how about I give you $1.50? Like you couldn't do that. And the other thing that was really interesting that I was reading about this era of like haggling and bartering for all of your purchases is that both parties involved in every negotiation assumed that they would somehow be ripped off in the end. So it wasn't like a fun, positive experience either, but it filled consumers' minds with this sense of distrust with anyone who was selling you stuff. And
Right.
so when they would come into these department stores and see that things had a set price, it kind of sketched them out. And we'll talk about that more. But I thought that was really interesting too, because like I could see you actually, Jenny, being really good at like haggling. Are you?
What do you mean? How?
I don't know. I it's like a skill that
kidding.
I admire because like my grandma Sandy is a genius of it. Like she should teach
Right.
like a TED talk or something about it. But like I am just like, oh, you said $2? Okay. Like I'm never like, how about $1.75? Like
Right.
I don't know why. I'm terrible at it.
I have to say, it depends on I mean, obviously, I've done a lot of thrifting and estate sailing and things like that, or just whatever, where that situation would come up. And I do have to say, if something is fair now, like if someone's like, oh, it's $2, like I'll be like, sure, whatever. I'm not gonna drill someone. But if someone's like doing ridiculous prices, I'll be like, come on, dude, let's talk serious. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not paying $25 for that. How about 10 or whatever? It was funny. I was just at an estates, or it was more like a garage sale, and this woman asked $3 to this guy for like some kind of pot, like a cooking pot. And he was like, how about 2? And she's like, no, 3. And I was like, you guys, okay, this is ridiculous. And he didn't buy the pot because she wouldn't do 2 over 3. So it's like some people just love the negotiation.
Yes.
And that's like part of their thing that they like got a deal. Like for me, it's like if I wanted the pot, $2 or $3 is not going to break it. You know what I mean? Like make or break my situation. If it was like $10 versus $2, okay, maybe. But it's just people just love to haggle,
Yeah. And conversely, some people are really delusional about their pricing. Like we went
Yes.
to a yard sale last weekend where it was like everything that was at the yard sale, someone had looked up on eBay to see what the buy it now price was and was
Right.
listing at that. And it's like, okay, well, you clearly don't know eBay because rarely is anything sold at the buy it now price. But like, it would
Right.
be like, here's a light fixture for $275. And it's just like, someone was selling the same thing down the road for $10. Like it was, Dustin and I were like, they're literally not going to sell anything today. Like this is ridiculous.
And some people like I think that's what happened. I mean, we've talked about this in our past, I think, episode about estate sales and thrifting and stuff, where people, when eBay and stuff started coming in, people just immediately think like, oh, that look up the price and that's what it is. It's like, no, that's not really. I mean, that's what they would like to get for it, maybe. But also, like for me, if I'm going to spend a higher ticket like price on something, I would expect that to be cleaned. To be like, there's like, that's why you go to like maybe like a nicer like vintage shop or an antique store or something like that. And they've tested it. They might have rewired something, cleaned it up. So it's like looking really sexy. If you're just like throwing something out of your attic, that's kind of, it's like, and it also depends on how much you want to move it. If you just have to get that price, then you can hold on to it forever, Let's see what happens.
Totally. Well, I always just assume I'm like, that person doesn't really want to sell anything.
Right.
Like they don't want to part with these things, but they feel obligated to. So this is why they're trying this. I don't know.
Right. Trying it on for size.
I'm like analyzing everyone I see at a yard sale. Everyone. Okay. So the other thing about shopping in this era is like shopping was always very straightforward and transactional. Get the item and leave. You didn't make a day of hanging out at your local dry goods or shop or general store. You weren't like, let's have lunch and then shop some more. Yeah. It was just like
you're coming in,
out,
getting your shopping done, going home. No lingering.
Like one thing I noticed in the very early era of internet dating sites, like I'm thinking specifically OkCupid, is that sometimes people would list shopping as a like an activity or hobby or an interest.
Right.
And like that didn't exist at this time. Well, I mean,
Right.
neither did OkCupid, but like if you said one of my interests is shopping, people would be like, literally, what do you mean? Like,
Yeah.
what's wrong with you?
Shopping what? Yeah.
Yeah. So you can thank the department store for being able to list shopping as an interest on your Tinder profile now, because these so-called palaces of consumption had like stunning architecture and fixtures, and they felt just as ornate and fancy as what would have been the fanciest other building you could find at that time, which was a church.
I was just going to say.
Like just like really, really nice. Richard Tedlow is a professor at the Harvard Business School who's written a lot on retailing, and he has a lot of really good, I don't know, just thoughtful things to say about department stores. So I'm going to quote him a few times, but he said, department stores were a new mode of retailing. They became destinations. They became places where you shopped not solely for procurement, but for entertainment.
Right.
Which is like, I mean, like, I get it. You know, shopping is a social activity now. People do it to relax. I mean, now I guess even at home when you're like scrolling and clicking and buying on your phone, it still is like an activity and not just like a errand you had to run.
Right.
This is also the beginning of those ideas of the customer is always right and your satisfaction is guaranteed or your money back. Why?
Slippery slope there.
Slippery slope. Yeah, seriously. And then millions of lives were ruined.
Yeah,
for the rest
the
of
whole
time,
society just crumbled.
Right. But this began because this idea of a fixed price was really intimidating and uncomfortable for shoppers, and they assumed that this price was created to rip them off.
Okay.
So these
that makes more sense then, I guess.
It does.
Yeah.
I mean, I still wish we could all erase the customer is always right from our brains.
Yes.
These kinds of policies made the shopper feel less anxious about not bargaining for a price because, you know, it felt uncomfortable that everyone would pay the same price, that you couldn't go in there and work it out on your own.
Right. And I guess it's like gives you like that comfort of like, I mean, people still use that to this day, right? Like the satisfaction guaranteed. Like if you don't like it, you can return it. Don't worry, you're going to love it. Like that whole kind of vibe.
Yeah. I mean, that's what returns are, right? But like pre-department stores, if you'd bought something at your local general store and returned it, they'd be like, no. All sales are final. You know, this is probably the invention of all sales are final as well. Right. But Ted Lowe, the person I quoted earlier, he said the department stores were one of America's first commercial institutions of trust. They worked to take your mind off of price.
Interesting. Well, they're creating that whole like environment, right? Like you're saying, like some of these early department stores especially had these beautiful spaces. You'd come in, you'd browse. I mean, browsing, right? That's probably like a whole concept that was born here too, right?
Yeah.
Browsing, looking around. It's like you're creating a mood. You're creating an environment. You're like feeling sexy. You're looking at stuff. And you're like, ooh, that would look great on me, you know. And it's like it's this whole kind of experience. It's experience shopping, really.
Right. And, you know, I mean, this isn't a feeling I've had for a long time because I don't go to a lot of department stores. And I would say most of my department store experiences in this century have been more depressing than glamorous.
Yeah.
But every once in a while in your life, you've gone into like a really nice department store and you have felt that glamour, that like aspirational feeling, that I don't know, just like luxury of being there, you know?
Totally, yeah.
Remember
everything smelled good and like
and it was
beautifully displayed.
Totally.
And
totally. And everything there was so desirable instantly. I remember, I mean, this was like 2000, 2001, going to Seattle for the first time and going to the Nordstrom flagship store there. And the thing that really struck me was that there were like televisions in the bathroom. I mean, first off, Nordstrom, legendary nice bathrooms. Let's be real.
Ooh,
always a nice bathroom. Meanwhile, you go to like the bathrooms in the Macy's in Herald Square, and they're like, it's like being at a rest stop, you know?
Yeah, I mean, going to bathrooms in Midtown are not great, like
it's
across
true.
the board, no matter where you are. You know, it's like
it's
even
true.
the sexiest bathrooms aren't that sexy.
It's true. Some, you know, as you have spent a lot of my adulthood going to like shows in sketchy venues and house parties and basements and the bathroom situations, you know, there's been some really wet bathrooms. A lot of them are painted black and covered with graffiti and you can't tell if they're dirty or not, but you just assume.
Yet so dark, you don't know what's going on.
Right. Yet still some of the worst, most horrifying bathroom experiences of my life have been in Midtown. Like,
Yeah.
I
I'd vouch for that. At least the Lower East Side or like some kind of warehouse party, you expect it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But then you go into some place and you're like, wow, okay, this is how we're going to roll. All right, they're doing this,
This is Macy's. You know
Right.
what I mean?
I do have to say, though, growing up, because I grew up, in the tri-state area, and we would come into the city and go to like Macy's and whatever. And I do remember the escalators at Macy's being pretty awesome. I don't know if you remember those. Like they're wooden. Like they had like the wooden rails, and I was just like, ooh, this is old timey feeling. And it had like all the old. They had elevators too with like the old Art Deco looking like lights and like metal work and stuff. But I always remember like riding on those wooden escalators and being like, ooh, this is so cool.
Yeah. And I do feel like that Macy's in Herald Square is trying to like get some of that glamour back. So they've been like pulling away some of the weird drop ceiling nonsense they did in like the 80s and the 90s.
Right.
Because some like I don't know if you've ever gone to, well, it's a Macy's now in Philadelphia, but it used to be Wanamaker's, and it's in Center City.
They have, that's the one that has the organ, right?
Yes, and they do this Christmas light show every year where you like lay on the floor. Anyway, that store is still stunning.
Yes, it is. I went a few, like not that long, maybe 5 years ago or something.
Yeah. It'd be great if they would just pull back a little bit more of the weird stuff they've done in the Macy's era, but it still is like, it's cool because it's got like balconies all the way around, and you look down into like a center sort of like, I don't know, courtyard of the department store. And like, that's how I picture all old department stores being. And
yeah. Well, that's like one of the quintessential ones, I feel like.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about John Wanamaker because he was definitely one of the early giants of the department store era. But this is what department stores in their golden era were like, pre-mall, pre the Limited, all of that stuff. They were beautiful. Like,
and back when people when architecture was important, and now I feel like people just want to throw things up quick and dirty and fast and cheap. And and that was when like the architectural, like you would build a building because it was like beautiful and you wanted to like show everyone how gorgeous we could make this thing. But now we don't do that anymore.
No,
really.
We're just like, how fast can we open this Chipotle?
Yeah, exactly. God.
So until about World War II, department stores had so much power and prestige. They sponsored parades, art exhibitions, patriotic lectures, you name it. I mean, Macy's still sponsors the Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York City, right? Department stores grew from just a place where ladies of leisure would spend their days shopping and lunching to a civic institution. And in that era between like, say, 1900 until World War II, this is where a lot of these department stores created things that we take for granted now as shoppers. So like Marshall Fields, which was, if you're from Chicago, you know that one. Also, Marshall Fields used to sell these mints that were sort of like a thin peppermint patty called Frango mints, and they were really good. Marshall Fields invented the bridal registry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was also the first store to offer revolving credit, aka a store credit card.
Okay.
They also created the concept of personal shoppers and
all the early stuff.
And here's one that was shocking to me: book signings. Because apparently their book department was legendary and they would have all kinds of events.
That makes sense. I mean, in theory, yeah, I get it.
I mean, imagine going to Macy's or Nordstrom to buy a book right now. Well, you could.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Also, Marshall Fields was the first department store to use escalators.
Interesting.
So I don't know what you were doing before then, just walking up lots and lots of stairs and getting tired.
Yeah.
I guess elevators,
Right. Because escalator to me is very department store mall vibe.
Oh, yeah.
It's like the backbone of that whole world.
Yeah, totally. You can't have a department store without an escalator or a mall. Yeah. So important. God, I love an escalator. Anyway, a lot of people also credit Marshall Fields with inventing the idea of the show-stopping holiday window display.
Yes. This was a big influence on me as a kid.
Oh, my God. Me too. So
yeah.
I mean, I haven't been to New York now since before the pandemic, but I would constantly be in New York for work, and I would always go check out the window displays because I had so much like nostalgia for it from when I was a kid. I mean, I feel like if you grew up in the part of the country where you and I grew up, it was like every year you had to go have some sort of family Christmas holiday outing to a major city so you could like look at the Christmas tree and look at the
Mm-hmm.
windows and do some Christmas shopping or whatever,
Yep.
right?
Totally.
I feel like as technology has made like animatronic windows easier, the windows just aren't as good.
Yeah, I mean, I would be curious to like know what time that shifted a little bit because growing up in the tri-state area, my dad works in Manhattan and I would come in with him and always did the windows. I always loved it. I mean, so much so that, we'll get into this a little bit later too. Some of my highlight like moments, that influenced me that were surrounded by department stores, but, I was very into window dressing and there was a time in maybe the late 90s that, Simon Doonan was like a serious window dresser for Barney's and stuff. He did a lot of their like I think art direction stuff, and so he did really amazing Barney's windows. And I was like so fascinated with it that I like wanted to actually be a window dresser when I grew up.
Wow.
Because I love this idea of like creating these small installation spaces where you could kind of create whatever you wanted. And, speaking also, which is still hard for me to wrap my head around, like pre-internet, where like I didn't see examples of like other ways that like someone who was interested in like sculpture, soft sculpture or installation, like what we would do with ourselves. Like, what do you do with that? Right.
Yeah,
I mean, now if I could go back in time, I'd be like, little Jenny, you can be an art director, it's like, it's okay. There's like options. But I was like, I'm going to be a window dresser because it was like a literal way that I could make art and install it in a space and create these little environments, So I was obsessed with Simon Doonan. For anyone who doesn't know who Simon Doonan is, you should definitely give that a search because he's had a really interesting career. He has been working in department stores, I think, from the get-go, since he started working. And he really made a name for that, like window dressing and that cool like vibe for a minute, like in the late 90s, early 2000s. He's just like an interesting guy and, married to also another one of my design heroes, Jonathan Adler, who has a really cool like OG story of how he got started too. But yeah, and I actually, when I graduated from high school, I wrote Simon Doonan a letter and telling him that I was so into him and he so inspired me and that I wanted to come work for him. And then I realized once I sent the letter off that I spelled his name wrong, which is and that was like back in the day, it's like, that was like 101, don't fuck that up. So I never heard back from Simon Doonan, but still he definitely influenced me in a way that was like really launched me into like really into interior design is what I ended up kind of landing in. But
I mean, I think that's a really good point because I was one of those kids, I mean, I still love this, who love to make dioramas, right?
Yeah.
Like literally my favorite thing to do would have dropped out of school and become a professional diorama builder if that were a job. Once again, like if you were into that kind of stuff, there wasn't a clear career path. And so it's not like my parents were like, you can't make dioramas anymore, but it was also like clear that wasn't going to like get me into college or anything.
Right.
But I feel like it's not even like I feel like the technology or lack thereof in terms of creating, items for these windows and like animating them and stuff was so limited that it really created this like super innovative, super creative group of people who created these windows, it like amazing. Whereas now the past couple of years when I've been in New York and I've walked by the Macy's windows, like they're still entertaining. And of course I want to see them. And obviously someone designed them, but they have this very mass produced vibe.
They do. Yeah. I mean, that's the difference too. If you do look at, like, I just kind of went into a little quick image search of some of Simon Doonan's windows, which were like more like 90s, mid to late 90s, I think. The materials that they had, I mean, there's probably a little bit of that, like some movement or things like electronic stuff happening, but they really create, like, you're like, oh wow, they created Andy Warhol's face out of a shredded paper and a thing, it's like, you're like, oh wow. There's just like really some real serious creativity around that. And it's still like, you're right, it still is, but I think also probably the budgets have changed. It's not as like new and hot. I feel like, I don't know, I think things have changed a little bit and they have become more mass produced. There's obviously someone who's art directing and like organizing that whole situation, but it doesn't feel as inspired
as
it used to me.
I agree. It's just there's less room for innovation. And my guess is that part of that reason is that they want to like mass produce, like
For all the
replicate.
stores and stuff.
Yeah. It's a bummer,
Yeah.
right?
It is a bummer.
Also, like, could the film Mannequin take place here in this year?
Yeah.
I know you're a fan.
That was on my list. That was a huge movie for me at the time. So I think I talked about this on our last episode when we were talking about like working women and some of the movies that I watched as a kid. So my grandmother, I think I mentioned, she every year would get me a bunch of VHS tapes, you know, of like, and I still am like, who did she talk to get these VHS tapes? Because it was like, obviously like the hot movies of the year, but there were some weird ones in there, you know, that I was like, oh, like she must have gone to a video store and like whoever that person was, I wish I could meet them. I was like, give me all the hot stuff. So Mannequin was one of the VHS tapes that she gave me, and I watched it like literally 500 times. I mean, I watched it a million times and I was obsessed with it. And also probably influenced, because that was 87, I think. And that definitely like influenced my interest probably in window dressing too, because that was like again a viable option for like an artist or like a freelance person to like make their way in the world. And I mean, it's probably, I haven't seen it in a while because it's not really streaming anywhere, but it took place in John Wanamaker.
Yeah,
department store.
What a name! I feel like if you have that last name, you have to be some like captain of industry, right?
Totally, somebody important. And it was just like it had a dream. It's like Andrew McCarthy, Kim Cattrall, and then Estelle Getty.
Yes.
Which I had forgotten that she was in there for a second. I was like, oh, right. And it was like a dueling, like the idea was like, it's actually like, the plot's like a little bit weird. So Kim Cattrall is traveling through time and space, as one does. And I was just like looking it up a little bit just to remember, to get my facts straight. I think she was supposed to be Egyptian, or she was in Egypt at the time. It's a little,
I think you're right.
And I'm also like, that was a little questionable. I'm like, what? Like, she's like a white girl in Egypt, whatever. There's problems. Yeah. There's always going to be problems. But she's traveling through time, and instead of like, you know, she was granted a wish to, instead of getting like an arranged marriage, she could like go to the United States or something and like fall in love. So she comes to, Andrew McCarthy, who's just so Andrew McCarthy in this movie, which I love. I waited on him once at a restaurant, and he was wearing exactly what you'd think he was wearing. He's wearing little white linen pants with like white tube socks and like shitty sneakers. And you're like, exactly what Andrew McCarthy would wear out to dinner. It's like a really nice restaurant.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, you know, and he creates this mannequin and like brings her to life, and no one can see her but him. And he like, they have these night adventures in the department store. And it's like, you know, this whole thing. And then they like save the department store by making amazing window displays that people come and see, and like revive this kind of like has-been department store, into like the hot shit place, you know, which is like hilarious. But, you know, I think that like, that movie definitely influenced me and probably led me into my love of Simon Doonan and all that kind of installation art. But if you haven't seen it, it's definitely cheesy. It's definitely like that 80s, like silly, you know, like love story comedy. But I think it's worth a watch, you know.
Yeah, it's like all movies of that era. It's incredibly flawed. So you have to really have a couple drinks before you watch it, so you're not like so disgusted by some of the dumb stuff in it. Yeah. But it is really entertaining. Now, the sequel, Mannequin 2, which is in no way really related to Mannequin 1. Have you seen Mannequin 2?
I haven't. I was just looking through, and I was like, I never saw it.
It's really bad.
I'm sure.
I remember our family renting it because we were like, oh, well, we all loved Mannequin 1. Let's get Mannequin 2. And it was like immediately like, the budget was clearly about a quarter of the first one, and it takes place in like a weird suburban department store, and I don't know. It's all really, really weird, and also just like really offensive too.
I mean, I'm gonna have to watch it.
You should watch it. I'm interested.
I just need it for my cultural bang.
Yeah, you need to. But just like set your expectations really low.
Oh yeah. I mean, even Mannequin, I loved it at the time. I was like a kid. So I was like sort of like, oh my God, a mannequin's coming to, you know, I was like an idiot kid. I was like, this is kind of fun. But still, it's not like an amazing, it's like a cult hit, you know, like if you saw it then and you have like a nostalgia for it, it's kind of like a weird cross section of like a moment in department store history. But yeah, I wouldn't have high expectations for the sequel, but I like that. I like trash. So I need to like, you know,
it's got great music. That's the most important part.
I'm sure. Yeah.
There's one for your life. Several teachers calling me. Gotta have it. We agree. There's more for your life at Sears. So shop around. Smile for daddy. Give him a high. Pull up the seat. Pick up the vibe. Come on in and shop. It's so hard to stop. There's more for your life. More for your life at Sears. Who am I tonight? Who am I gonna be tonight? Should I set him on fire? Be awesome and cool. Nobody's so cold, break every rule. I don't care what you see, 'cause what you get is totally me.
Fit your fantasies at JCPenney.
Smarter than ever, JCPenney.
Well, it's great that you talked about John Wanamaker, where a mannequin was set, because John Wanamaker opened the first so-called modern department store in Philadelphia in 1877. So some of the innovations here, which are like hilarious to me. This was the first store to use price tags.
Wow.
Where like you would go up and everything would have a price on it, you know, instead of just like you'd have to ask, which by the way, if I ever have to ask how much something costs, I don't bother. I just never buy it.
I hate that. It's just awkward. You know, it's like, let me know up front so I know what I'm dealing with. Because then you feel like you're being cheap, but also you don't have money. And it's like, you know, it's like, I don't like that either.
Exactly. This was the first store to use electric lighting.
Oh.
That was in 1878. I don't know what they were doing before. I guess candles or something. It's really disturbing.
Wow, that is some drama. Could you imagine like shopping by candlelight? Oh my God.
Romantic. Actually, it's probably like gas lamps.
Yes, right.
Out here, still, it's pretty weird. Out here where I live, some of the Amish stores, like the Bird and Hand Farm Supply, is owned by an Amish family, and so there's no electricity in there. Although somehow they process credit card transactions, I'm not really sure. Anyway, all the lighting and the fans are gas powered.
Oh wow!
So it is kind of weird. I mean, they're not open very late, but during the winter when it gets dark really early, it's kind of like spooky shopping in there.
Yeah.
Like really it's a little hard to see. Also, John Wanamaker was the first department store to have an in-store telephone system. So, you know, different departments could call one another.
Right. And just check a price or check a thing.
Totally. And my favorite thing of all, they were the first store to use pneumatic tubes to transfer cash and documents throughout the store, which I love.
So love that. I found it so future as a kid. And we go to like, the bank, and my mom, like remember the drive-in? Everyone did like the drive-up window at a bank. That was like also a thing. Yeah. And my mom would put in her checks, and they would shoot up. I was like, oh, this is so cool, like Jetson style.
Totally.
You know?
I mean, I think some banks still use it, although like. When was the last time you were at a bank? Not just a drive-through of a bank.
I mean, maybe like an ATM. That's pretty much as far as.
Yeah, me too.
I had to go to a bank recently to like reset a password or something stupid I couldn't do online, but barely I'm ever at a bank these days.
Right. But I do have so many memories of like my grandma, going with my grandma to the bank, going through the drive-through, putting the checks and everything in the little canister, and it getting sucked over, and then, you know, something would happen in there, and then it would come back and it would be like the receipt and lollipops for all of us in the car, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is how sad. Like, this was like our thrilling moment out. You know what I mean? Like, now, like, kids are like, have games and stuff, and like, they're always on their phone, and like, they have as entertainment and like movies in the car and shit. We would be like, cool, they just put something in a tube and got sent over to another lady. And it's like, that was like our thrilling entertainment for the afternoon.
True.
Ride,
it's like, wow, the two most exciting things to me to do with my grandma during the summer were to go to the bank to see the pneumatic tubes, and then to go to the drive-through car wash.
Oh,
this is what we had.
Fun. Right. These are the entertainment like outlets that we were experiencing.
Also, as we're talking about this, I'm wondering that as banks and in-person banking and drive-through banking kind of declined, what kind of impact did this have on the lollipop industry?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because you know it
they
did.
Don't do that as much. Even now, well, you know, now like all the moms, I mean, like that I see around, like in Brooklyn. And so they're all like, no sugar and everyone's gluten free and this and that. And so like no one's giving out lollipops at like doctor's offices or anything anymore.
Yeah, what do you give
or
out?
banks or anything. Yeah, I bet.
Fidget spinners or something.
That's another episode you need to look at. The lollipop industry.
What happened to lollipops? Another department store that's very famous that had a television show about it on PBS is Selfridges. I don't know if you watch this show, Jenny, but my friend Jem, who's been on the podcast before, actually got me into it back in the day, and we would talk
What's it called?
It was called Mr. Selfridge. You can probably still watch it online. It was actually really entertaining. And it starred Jeremy Piven, although we always joke that our one friend said that Jeremy Piven was very unconvincing. I don't know. It was really entertaining, although I can't remember much that happened on it, but it was like very dramatic.
Yeah.
So it was like very soapy. So Selfridges is a real department store. It was established in 1909, and it made shopping even more special and experiential. It was actually founded by Henry Gordon Selfridge, aka Mr. Selfridge of the show, who began his career at Marshall Fields in Chicago. And like now, as we just talked about, like Marshall Fields was like a major innovator, getting people to spend their money, right? So he took everything he learned and went to London to open his own store, Selfridges. So he was an American, by the way.
Okay.
Even though his name he sounds very British, right? So
yeah,
this one thing that the department store did that no other department store had been doing yet was it advertised very heavily, like in newspapers, and it encouraged customers to shop for fun, not just for necessity.
Right. Again, back to this whole. I mean, at the same time, was this like in culture? I would assume this would line up that this time people were making a little bit more money. And they had more dispensable, like more income coming in?
I mean, it depends who you are. Like all things,
sure.
right?
Sure.
Still a pretty massive wealth gap there.
Right.
So one thing that was like Selfridge's like claim to fame was his ability to create reasons to keep people in a store, which by the way is like, even today, someone is in a corporate office somewhere for some store talking about ways to keep people in the store
That's
longer.
like 101, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah. I mean, I've had so many meetings about this kind of stuff throughout my career. That's why you go to stores and you see that they like put in an espresso bar, or like they have a bar or a place to sit down and hang out or play video games or browse books or whatever. So he was like the creator of this idea. So his store had a library, a roof garden, reading and writing rooms where you could go read or write a letter or just reflect, a first aid room, a silence room, just so you could go like take a zero with soft lights and deep comfy chairs.
That sounds amazing. By the way.
I'm like, I could stay there all day. I know.
I know.
Of course, the store also had several pretty affordable but nice restaurants. Keep the ladies in there all day.
Right.
The store would host educational exhibits. I know the first monoplane was exhibited there, and lots of other stuff. Just like, let's get everyone in the store as often as possible and keep them here. Like, make a day of it, going to Selfridges.
Right.
And on top of that, the Selfridges staff was encouraged to sell. And this was like a new idea too, because before that, you go back to your general store, your dry goods store, they're not trying to sell you anything. They're like, what do you want? Let me get it. Give me the money. Bye.
Right.
It's
very transactional.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. These department stores became like social, experiences where you would be like, oh, I have to go get a gift and then we can have lunch and like go sit in the garden and do all these things. So it's like before that, I mean, I'm trying to think what those places would have been. I mean, they didn't really exist in this level.
No, they didn't really. Yeah. It was just like you went and did something else. Like you went to church, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, church.
There weren't a lot of places to go. You know what I mean? It was just like such a different time. It's hard for me to imagine. Although it's almost like where I am now, where there's like nowhere to go because it doesn't feel safe or I'm not interested. We actually went to the mall the other day because it was my birthday and there was literally nothing we could do. But there was an arcade at the mall and we could wear masks. And we went to the mall and I was like, wow, the mall is so boring. I'm not interested in any of these stores at all.
No, because now it's become, I mean, this setup that you're telling me with like a garden and a silence room, I'm like, hell yeah, sign me up for all that. But the mall now is just like shit food, like fast food, kind of like shitty stores that you don't really care about. And then like walking, I mean, it's maybe a nice place to, remember people used to just walk in the mall in the morning?
Yeah, the mall
My mom used to do
walkers.
that.
I had a job
Mall
at the mall,
walkers.
and I worked for a bookstore. And so on Sundays, I would always open. So I'd have to get there at
Mm,
like 11 because the mall opened at noon. You know, I would like count the money and get everything set up for the day. And I would see the mall walkers walking back and forth, and there would be a few who kept trying to come and get in the store before I
yeah.
pulled at the gate, and I'd have to be like, we don't open until noon, you know. We should definitely do a follow-up episode about malls because I have like, I mean, so many stories, so many
Yes.
thoughts there. I will
Yeah.
say in Japan, the malls capture what Selfridge was doing. Where,
Yes.
I mean, there are like gardens and like places to hang out and just look at the internet, but there's also like obviously stores, but like good food and good restaurants and
Southeast Asia is
arcades.
like that too. Like
Yeah.
Thailand, when I go with my husband, like sometimes you just like go hang out in the mall it's also really cool in there, which is nice when it's hot, but they're actually like really nice malls with like high-end stores and, you know, things like that.
Yeah. I mean, in Japan, it is totally reasonable to spend 4, 5, 6 hours in a mall because you might have a delicious meal and go use the photo booths and do some shopping. And there'll be like an art exhibit and like maybe a Ferris wheel or something. And the other great thing about malls in Japan is that they're really focused on specific customers. So like I personally prefer the teenager mall. Like we go to the teenager mall. That's where my interests are. I'm a teenager. And we'll like be there all day. We'll be like, should we go to the dessert buffet? Maybe, you know, what about the Ferris wheel? Like, what do you want to do? Like, it's just like fun. Right. Well, speaking of Japan, the first modern style department stores were Mitsukoshi and Matsuzakaya, which both began as kimono stores and then just rapidly started carrying more stuff. And in 1924, Matsuzakaya began allowing customers to wear their street shoes indoors rather than like taking them off and putting on slippers, which was like a big cultural shift.
Yeah.
In the 20s, many of the big Japanese railways began opening department stores of their own at railway hubs right in the train terminals, and you still see that now.
Interesting.
And they're massive. Every big train station has a massive department store attached to it, and I just thought that was just like how it was, and so it was interesting to learn that like this is when it started. I did not realize that the railway companies had started these stores. I did think it was odd that they frequently shared names, but there you go.
Yeah. I mean, I've been around Tokyo and a little bit north, but I haven't spent a ton of time around other like train areas.
Yeah. It's like every even like a medium size or small city at the train station, there's a department store.
Interesting.
Yeah. I just was like, oh, I guess it's just because it's more convenient for people. I mean, that is part of it, right?
Sure,
but also because people are coming through. It's really, really smart.
This white carnation is the symbol of the most popular savings event around. White Flower Day, one day only at Macy's. You know that. White Flower Day means outstanding savings on every floor. You know that too. But did you know White Flower Day is tomorrow at all Macy's? Well, now you do.
White Flower Day, White Flower Day, White Flower Day.
Oh, I discovered a new store. Well, not a new store, but new to me. Montgomery Ward. New because I didn't know they carried so many brand names. Sony, Maytag, Jordache, and selection. In microwaves alone, I saw 9 different models. So I became a new Montgomery Ward customer.
Things are changing at Montgomery Ward, and we're earning some pretty tough customers. Get the lowest prices of the year on these microwave ovens, now at Montgomery Ward.
Department stores continue to grow and grow, but they were still primarily, for the most part, a city thing for a long time, right? Because that's where the bulk of people were. The thing about department stores that was, you know, a minus, if you will, for them was that they would push a lot of smaller shops out of business because the department stores had more access to money. They had more control of the vendors supplying goods to stores. And more people just opted to go to department stores over smaller neighborhood shops, not because they were cheaper, just because they were fancier, right? And you felt fancy shopping there. I mean, I would say we've seen, fast forward like 100 years to now, we've seen that like places like Amazon or Walmart are pushing, you know, all these other retailers out of business. not because they're cooler or nicer or fancier feeling, but because they're cheaper. But the same kind of thing is happening. We're like, you know, most of the groceries purchased in the United States come from a Walmart. And so Walmart, for example, has this massive control over food pricing and production in the United States.
Right.
That's kind of what was happening back then, but with department stores and maybe like clothes and shoes and makeup and stuff like that.
Right.
So ironically, in the late 1900s, larger department store chains would, devour and destroy these smaller family-owned local department stores that had totally destroyed even smaller locally owned businesses.
Yeah.
So it just sort of like spreads over time. So fast forward to after World War II, consumerism became a way of life. Like everything that we've talked about happening got ramped up times 10.
Right.
And so these department stores continued to thrive and multiply, and they no longer had to be in a big city because there were smaller cities and then there were bigger towns. And so there were many more places to open these stores. So they opened a ton. And then came the mall era.
Right.
Of course, department stores moved into malls.
Yeah.
And they became the anchor stores for a mall, right?
Yep. I mean, you can't talk about department stores and not talk about malls a little bit, especially that time period. Because they're so like hand in hand. You have the big, we had two malls. We had Trumbull Mall, which is like kind of the regular mall with like normal stuff, and then we had like the fancy mall, and they both, the fancy mall was in Stamford, Connecticut, and they had like that was like kind of like sexier stuff, but they both had like at least 2 or 3 big department stores that sort of anchored it, and then your little stores peppered through.
Yeah, and this was pretty normal, right? Like you can picture like malls almost sort of look like barbells with like the 2 big things on the end that were always like at least 2 department stores, right?
Yep.
And then like the little like walkway in between. Of course, then maybe they'd have a more complicated shape, but every end had a department store.
Yeah.
And that's just how they were, right? And I mean, you go now to a mall, like even the mall on the other side of Lancaster is a big mall, and it's probably like one of the better malls in central Pennsylvania. But like 2 of the department store anchor stores are gone.
Yeah.
I mean, the mall itself still seems to be doing really well, but like there's just these massive empty spaces sitting there. But in the early days of malls and through the 80s, really, you couldn't have a mall without a department store. Like you just couldn't. No one would move in there. Stores wanted to be guaranteed that department store traffic. So in the pre-mall era, you had to spend your time at a department store if you wanted to have one-stop access to all kinds of things. And you didn't have any other option for a place where you could both hang out and shop. So department stores were that place. But guess what? That's what malls are too.
Yeah.
It's a place where you could hang out all day, eat, see a movie, socialize, and buy stuff. Furthermore, as the 80s and the peak of the mall era rolled in, this was the era of the specialty retailer. And this is what they're still called. This is basically any store in a mall that isn't a department store. So Limited, Express, Gap, Bath and Body Works. These are all specialty retailers, which is feels just so antiquated to me too.
Yeah.
But this, at the time, at least in the 80s, what made these stores so innovative is that they all catered to a specific customer type or lifestyle or aesthetic rather than just a customer grouped by age, which department stores still do. Like, let's think about the departments that are available for women to shop in, right? Juniors. That's for teenagers. Missies, that's for everyone else, I guess, except there'll be like one other department that might be called women. That's for even older women. And then, of course, there'll be the plus department like back in the corner,
Yeah.
And
hide them all. Hide all the big ladies in the back.
Yeah, of course, right? And so it's like, it's not grouped by like the departments don't exist around like the kind of stuff you're into. Like, I'm
a sporty girl who,
exactly.
or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I like a retro vibe. There's none of that. Like, it's like, how old are you? There's your department. Good luck.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the reasons that department stores are they feel just like so meh, because there's nothing there that appeals to me,
But think about it like when you were a teen, right? And, pre-internet, whatever. And we had magazines that would, as far as like, that would like kind of like inform you of like fashion and art things happening or interesting trends or silhouettes of whatever people are wearing or that kind of stuff. And like, I mean, really like fashion would be like magazines or department stores or some sort of store, because otherwise, I mean, where are you? I mean, maybe like, empty, like, shows and what people are wearing and stuff like that. But when you're going to actually shop and look for stuff, that was really it. And they dictated like what we saw and what we thought was cool, which is crazy now to think about.
I know.
I'm just like, ew, like, don't tell me what to do. I mean, and granted, as you were too, we were thrifters. So that was what I think one of the things that really like motivated me as well, is that like I didn't want the same thing that everybody else had. Right. And it was like full price. So like if my mom, I mean, how many times when you like go back to school, you'd go to the, go department store and get like a couple new sweaters or shirts or pants or your stuff for school, or like prom. You'd be like, okay, go. I mean, it's amazing we all didn't have the same prom dresses, or, because it's like we were all buying from the same places. I think that's what drove me to really love thrifting and that sort of stuff too, because it was like, I could test stuff out and it was cheap, and like I didn't have to like buy the nice thing that I know that I'll wear. I could like have fun with it, so it was, I think that was one of the reasons why I was really drawn to that too.
Yeah. No, I agree. There were definitely, I would say through middle school, I was very aware of what everyone else was into. And there was that very serious like herd mentality amongst like what my classmates would wear. Like there was one 6-month period where they were all wearing this same like ribbed tunic top from Express that wasn't cute,
right?
But it was like what everyone wore every day and you had to wear it. Or like everybody was wearing like boat shoes without socks for a while,
right?
Which I did actually do, and I got it like really messed up my feet.
Mary Jane's or something. Everyone was wearing it.
Yeah. There were just always these things, and you would do it, right?
Right. Because you're young.
Like, you're young and you just like want life to be chill.
You want to fit in, and like, you're like, who else was wearing that stuff? And you're like trying it on for size.
Right. By the time I reached high school, I was like, I can't afford these clothes and I don't want them. So, and my eyes were open to the world of thrifting. But that was, I mean, that's still not a majority of people,
Right.
And so these stores like Limited or Express, and later like Aeropostale and American Eagle and Abercrombie, you name it, they gave people a sense of individuality by shopping there.
Right.
Which of course, we laugh at because we're like, oh my God, it's like, so, that's
corporate,
just like a type.
bullshit.
Yeah, it's corporate. It's like not cool. And honestly, the one thing I noticed at the mall this week as we were walking through, I didn't go in any stores. I just looked in the windows, but I started to see that all these stores that for so long had focused on this individual lifestyle or customer were all kind of starting to look the same. Like Aeropostale looked exactly like American Eagle.
Right.
And American Eagle looked exactly like Hollister, and on and on and on. And it was just like all the same clothes basically in the mall, no matter where you went. And so that, what that does is it pushes people to look for the cheapest clothes, which then, like makes shoddier clothes and makes people cycle through clothes faster. All the bad things that have happened in fast fashion. I mean, there's a multitude of reasons why they're happening. But one thing is that like there's no longer a guaranteed individuality by shopping at a certain place. And so then you're just like, I want the cheapest thing. I don't care where it comes from.
Well, a lot of times too, like those stores are getting their product from maybe the same place in China or something.
Yeah. 100%.
So I know I had a friend who worked in a little boutique, and she was like, this is the same stuff they're selling at H&M. It's just like, same print or whatever, but they're selling it as like a nicer, trying to be like a nicer place. So that goes down to like production stuff now, which gets kind of dicey these days.
Oh, yeah. Well, like, for example, Victoria's Secret, right? I mean, I've never been like much. There was a time in high school where maybe for 6 months I thought, I mean, I couldn't afford Victoria's Secret, but it seemed like it might be really sexy if I could.
Right.
But, there are people who, maybe not as much now, but during a certain era, maybe in the aughts, were obsessed with Victoria's Secret underwear or bras, thought they were the best quality, the best fit, whatever. I have shocking news for everyone. Every chain that was selling underwear and bras at this point was getting it from the same factory that was making all the stuff for Victoria's Secret.
I bet.
I've worked multiple places in my career where the same vendors were making the underwear as Victoria's Secret. So like, it's just, everybody's making the same stuff, right?
It's called branding.
Yeah, exactly. So, but back in the 80s, these specialty stores that were implying this like individuality, this lifestyle, creating this mood in a way that department stores really weren't anymore. I mean, they took a chunk of those department store
Yeah.
sales. And they also made the department stores seem older and less relevant. But department stores still managed to thrive in the 80s and I would say like the first half of the 90s
Yeah.
by offering brands that you couldn't get at other stores. And I remember this so clearly, especially from like middle school when like brands were so important. And I, of course, wished
Yeah.
I could have those brands. So
Right.
like Guess, Clinique, Esprit,
Benetton.
Liz Claiborne. Yeah, just like anything that like you would see ads for these brands in magazines, but they didn't have stores.
Right.
You'd go to a department store, you know?
Right.
And like where I lived, the fancy department store was called the Bon-Ton, and they had all those brands. But for me, it was like, oh, the Bon-Ton is like where rich people shop.
Yeah.
Because the most expensive clothes I could imagine at that point in my life were like Esprit and Guess and whatever else they were selling in there.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Department stores still felt kind of aspirational because of that. Here's a great quote from Ted Lowe talking about department stores' role as anchor stores kind of being their undoing. Malls depended on being anchored by two department stores, one at either end. What's in between those two stores? Small stuff at first, but eventually there's a Gap, a Limited, a Banana Republic. By going out to the malls and anchoring them, these department stores created traffic for a great many specialty stores that otherwise would have had a hard time creating any demand, essentially because they couldn't afford the advertising, which is a necessary cost of doing business in a department store. The boutique businesses could attack the department stores from the safety of the shadow of the department store. What has replaced the department store is the mall itself, which now plays the role of amusement place and social center. So basically,
I get it. That
the
makes
malls,
sense.
right? The malls wouldn't have succeeded without the department stores, but then the malls destroyed the department stores.
Right. They built a monster. They were like, hey, everybody, come hang out. We're going to fund this project. And then all these little guys came in, and then the little guys just made a bigger like mall department store in itself, which makes sense. Yeah.
And as the malls began to die off, department stores were the first casualty. You know, you can still go to a mall that's doing really well and all the department store spots are empty.
Yeah, it's like stuff like Uniqlo's there now, or Gap still might be there, or something like that. Versus like, yeah, the department stores are usually, and if they are there, they usually seem very quiet.
Yes, totally. Or like super depressing.
Yes.
Like every once in a while in my adult life, I found myself in a Macy's because I had a coupon or something for something specific they had in the kitchen section. It's always the kitchen section that brings me to Macy's.
Yeah.
And it's weird in there. They're like not well maintained. There'll be like leaking ceilings and moldy carpet and just feels dirty and the fixtures are broken. It's depressing. It's not what that glamour used to be, you know?
No.
Plus, well, we know that like the rise of online shopping killed them all.
Right.
But also department stores no longer had the cachet of selling brands, you know, like Esprit or Liz Claiborne or whatever.
Yeah.
Because places like TJ Maxx and Nordstrom Rack were also selling these brands at hot, low prices. So why would you go to Macy's or even Nordstrom, right?
We started talking about that. I feel like there was a time where maybe my mom and like some of her friends were like, oh, I don't pay full price. Like that became a thing. Like, you know, you always like who would pay full price for something when you can get it at a discount store or get a coupon or like on sales or like, that was like a thing. Like, I feel like I heard people talking about it at the time. Oh,
for sure. So I found an article from 1985 that was basically like, hey, you probably think these off-price stores are a joke, but don't laugh because they're serious business, you know? Yeah. And that article said by 1990, about 6% of clothes will be bought from off-price stores. So keep your eye on them. But actually, these days, it's more like 3/4 or more of all clothes that are bought in the United States come from like TJ Maxx, Nordstrom Rack, Ross, Marshalls, those kinds of places. So, I mean, that's, you know, I've talked about this on the show before, but like, if most of our clothes are coming from TJ Maxx and Ross and Marshalls and whatnot, there's just this tiny little bit left of our wallets that we're going to be using to buy clothes that all these other places are fighting over. Of course, department stores are going to lose out. Of course, right?
And people aren't really looking for, I mean, like, it's funny. I was thinking recently, people aren't really looking for that, like, social thing anymore either, because it's what they really like. Department stores kind of brought to the table. It's like the experience. You go in, you check out what's going on, what's new, get a soda, do a thing. You know, there's like this whole thing. And I feel like people don't really do that anymore because we can also search online. You know, it's like if I'm like, hey, I need a specific item, like I'm looking for running sneakers. Instead of going down to the department store and checking out what they have to offer, I'll just look online and order it there, especially when you need something specific and you're not just like browsing for fun. And I think that like that's one of the huge reasons why that killed that sort of experience. I even sometimes, which is so crazy because I can't, like the way my brain has been wired now, I do this in thrift stores sometimes too, but I'll walk into any kind of retail store and immediately be like, in my head, like keyword search something. I'll be like, if I'm looking for like a dress, like, oh, I want to check, I'll be like dresses, oversized dress, you know. I'm like, Jenny, you can't do that. Like, and my brain for a second will be like, try to keyword search when I'm like IRL in a store. I'm like, oh my God, it's just like goes to show, you know?
It's true though. And I think that our ability to find just about anything we want online has made shopping in person feel so inefficient and like disappointing.
Yeah.
I mean, like, shoes are a great example. How many times in the pre-e-commerce era did you go look to the mall to get a pair of shoes for something specific and find nothing that you liked?
Yeah, or they didn't have your size or something.
Exactly.
Like,
they never had your size, or you just didn't like them, or they weren't comfortable. God, remember when we would have to go school clothes and school shoe shopping? It was so stressful.
Yeah.
And my grandma had this hang up that you couldn't go to like a Foot Locker or like a regular shoe store in the mall. You needed to go to the department store because she said they were the only places that knew how to measure your foot the right way.
Yes.
And I would be like, yeah, but couldn't we like, you know, find out my size here and then go buy something cool somewhere else?
Yeah.
You know? And it was like, no.
And there was always like a guy who worked in the shoe department who looked like kind of bummed. You know, he was just like trying to just like make some money for his family, like measuring your foot and like going to get shoes. And I guess they made commission on that stuff. But it was always just sort of like a whole thing with like the shoes.
Yeah. They bring out the one pair that you wanted to try on and two other pairs that you didn't ask for.
Right.
You have to try them all on and walk around and look at your foot in the weird foot mirror and all that stuff. And I mean, like, I remember specifically for my grandma, that service element of shoe shopping was really important. She couldn't understand why any of us would just like go buy a pair of shoes at Payless just off the shelf. Yeah. Because how would we know if they were the right size?
Right.
You know, or the right shoe for us. So, you know, department stores, they lose out to all the chain stores in the mall first. Then the chain stores in the mall and the department stores start losing out to, you know, TJ Maxx. And then Amazon and Walmart swoop in to pick up a lot of our remaining clothing shopping money, leaving very little for any of these brands. They're all fighting over it. So, of course, department stores lost, along with a lot of other stores. So one thing I was thinking about a lot is how I remember growing up, like we had a lot of different department store, like local department stores. And like if you went to another city to visit someone like a relative or something, there'd be different department stores there. And of course, the reality is they all sold the same stuff, right? But it felt different. And then one day they just like all became Macy's. And I was like, how did that happen? I need to know, right?
Yeah.
So the Macy's story is so epic that I could literally make a whole episode about it. Like there's people getting weird, rare diseases. Someone dies on the Titanic. I mean, there's like, it's all happening. There's a story about a guy buying a building just to stand in Macy's way of developing, and they just built the building around the building that he bought. And
oh my God. What time frame is this happening? Like what's the...
late 1800s, early 1900s. So much drama. So Macy's began as a series of dry goods stores in the mid-1800s in New York City. And what they were doing is they were just kind of buying up more and more space around each store until they kind of turned into department stores. And so the flagship store moved uptown to what we know as the Herald Square store at 34th Street and Broadway in 1902. And that is a situation in which there was a guy who hated Macy's. He resented that they were developing in the way that they were. And so he bought a building in the middle of that block in order to prevent them from expanding. So what Macy's did was buy all the other space on the block, build a huge building all around that building, kind of encasing it. And now there's like a Macy's sign that rests on top of that building That building is still not owned by Macy's.
Interesting.
Interesting, right? So
Yeah.
Macy's, people are loving Macy's, right? Over time, Macy's expanded stores throughout the New York area. And then it was like, well, now that we've done that, let's set our sights on national expansion by acquiring local department store chains. Basically, if your local department store became a Macy's in the 80s or 90s, it was part of this process. So they're gobbling up store after store from like World War II through to the 80s. And in the 80s, Macy's tried to buy Federated Department Stores, which is another like massive corporate overlord of department stores at this point. Like they owned Bloomingdale's, Filene's, lots of other chains of department stores. But they failed in their attempt to buy it because they lost to a Canadian company called Campo, which was owned by a real estate developer. And he was gobbling up every property, every company he could. He was eventually ousted from the company like a year or two later for just doing a bad job and maybe being psycho. I'm not sure. But Federated Department Stores was not to ever belong to Macy's. Instead, in 1992, Macy's declared bankruptcy, and it was acquired by Federated Department Stores.
A twist.
And then it continued to gobble up even more companies, including the May department store chain in 2005, Lord & Taylor in 2006, although I think now Lord & Taylor belongs to someone else, like a venture capital company, something like that. There's been a lot of moving around of all these department stores. In 2006, lots of chains that Federated and Macy's had gobbled up over the years officially renamed as Macy's. So this was like the Macy's apocalypse or something. So Filene's, Foley's, Hecht's, the Jones Stores, Kaufman's, Marshall Field's, Meyer & Frank, Robinson's May, and Strawbridge's, among many other local department store chains. I mean, they bought them all basically over the period of like 30 years. They all became Macy's all at once. But what this meant is that suddenly some malls were about to have 2 Macy's stores, maybe even 3. So all of those extra stores were liquidated. So then we start to see these empty spaces in malls where anchor stores used to be. Yeah. In some of those situations, weird stores moved in. Like I know one mall out here, one of the anchor stores is a Burlington coat factory. Another one, the anchor store is a Walmart. Like you started to see weird stuff like that popping up. Or like in the peak of Forever 21, which is past, Forever 21 was moving into a lot of these abandoned department stores and opening like mega stores.
Right.
You know, they probably regret that now. So Macy's is massive. Suddenly every department store is Macy's. That's what it feels like. And then like, you know what? Department stores aren't doing well, right? And they haven't been for a long time. It was an interesting decision to continue to buy more department store chains.
They were really doubling down.
They were really doubling down on a bad idea, right? So, you know, they still managed to struggle on into the aughts because people still weren't shopping online that much. People didn't buy clothes from Amazon, you know, that kind of thing. But then like 2010 hits and it's like, oh shit. Everybody either buys stuff online or from like Walmart or something now. So Macy's had to close 52 stores.
And also, like, I mean, they didn't really innovate. Like, that's the thing. It's like, you know, these older, this is like a story that I think happens a lot where it's like, they didn't look to the future.
No.
You know what I mean? They could have like started, like launched like a really sick, like modern marketplace online. Or, I mean, I don't know, but maybe that seems dated now even, but like, I don't know, like there might have been some things they could have tried to like look forward and see how they can take this idea of the department store, but like, what does that mean in the future when we have places like Amazon and everyone's buying stuff online, and like, what does a department store, and I'm sure people have these conversations, but we did, as consumers, we didn't really see like some new thing that they were bringing to the table or something interesting that could have changed that a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. Like every bit of press I read around this like apocalypse of department stores that began in 2010 addressed their reluctance to sell online and how they came too late to the game. They had bad websites. They didn't adapt to like the times in terms of the kind of brands and products that people wanted to buy. They didn't update their stores. There wasn't like a lot of brand discovery anymore because they didn't do anything new.
Right. And I think that's a huge problem with like a lot of these like old timer establishments. And you can talk about this probably with like bunch of different things. I've seen like magazines that didn't do that and like certain like kind of pillars of this community of this whatever. And they just didn't think forward. And they were probably some older, old dudes that were like, no one's going to do that. They're going to come and buy stuff in the store or something. And like no one really changed it.
Yeah, it's true. It's
sad.
Like, we're talking about Macy's right now, but like think about all of the other department stores that are like gone. Sears.
Yeah.
JCPenney, I don't know. Yeah.
JCPenney. Well, JCPenney actually, it's funny, I kind of know this because when I was working at Alfie, I got approached by JCPenney to do something, I don't know. They tried to reach out. Yeah, they were trying to reach out to like younger, cool brands and like bring in some stuff. And they really did make an effort to like kind of be like affordable and cool sort of vibe. But I think that was just too late,
Yeah, I will say I have fond memories of JCPenney. There was a certain period for a couple years in the 90s where they definitely were trying, and you could literally buy Gencos at JCPenney.
Yeah.
Like they tried, but it's just like they never, I will say, like Nordstrom is still around, right? Nordstrom is, most of Nordstrom's business actually comes from Nordstrom Rack. If they didn't have Nordstrom Rack, I don't think Nordstrom would be around. But how Nordstrom stays relevant, and when people talk about Nordstrom, they don't have the same sense of like sadness as they like when they talk about Macy's, because Macy's is depressing, right?
And those are like the more mainstream ones. I mean, I think that's what I think would happen, right? So stuff like Macy's, so growing up, my go-to department store, which I went with my mom like 5 million times, was Lord & Taylor. But those were like kind of generally for the mass, like your average people, families, people working, just like everyday American kind of vibe. So I think those all died out when there was stuff from like Walmart's and, online shopping and stuff like that, because you're getting your more like average goods, right?
Right, yeah.
But then I think the ones that have stayed around or you have more like Barney's, the really kind of niche high end, like I think it was Nordstrom too that started selling like recently. Not, it wasn't. I think it was there like a brand, like a sector of Nordstrom that was like really sexy design stuff.
Yeah,
I think it was called. Yeah, and like I know Deuce and Deucin was on there, and like we sold stuff to them. I think it was Nordstrom. I'm pretty sure. And they kind of did this like designer collection. So stuff that were more like niche and high end maybe did okay because people were like still looking for some of that. Because I even talk about that now. I mean, you and I have talked about this too. It's like, because we've become everything's online, you can buy direct from companies, small businesses, small makers, things like that. Sometimes it's hard to find those things though.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, even still, we can search and stuff like that. Of course you can find stuff, but like if you're somebody who really wants to buy like sustainable small brands, it's like, where do you go as like a quote unquote marketplace that can show you some of these places if you're not familiar with all of them, or you're just starting out to figure out what you like? Or so it is interesting. Like, even though we've gotten away from this idea of like, this big marketplace, if you will, of like a department store that shows you stuff, it's like at the same time, it's kind of like everything's so spread out and niche, it sometimes is hard to find. So it's like, it's interesting, like now what that looks like if you're going to go to a place that is going to bring you different brands and have like a lifestyle vibe around it.
Yeah, well, I think that is how Nordstrom has stayed relevant, because they have been the most experimental. I mean, you go into their stores in general, it's kind of like whatever, especially like if it's like not in a big city. But they, for example, they really brought this idea of like concession, like shop in shops to the United States. Like I remember Topshop, for example, which even though Topshop has gone out of business, I think you can still buy Topshop in Nordstrom. And that was a really big idea to say, we're going to take this retailer who at that point was only in the UK and had very aspirational qualities to it, even though it was fast fashion. It was still like very edgy, and it was, it was from London, so it's cool, right? They started putting in these little like pop-up Topshops in some of their stores, and they expanded it. So that brought in young people or people who were more fashion oriented, who otherwise wouldn't have been at Nordstrom. They have a Madewell shop in a lot of their locations. They did this thing. I don't think they're doing it anymore. It was called a pop-in, which were these curated pop-up shops online that'd be curated by different, people in the design and fashion world. And then you'd
Yes.
find cool brands there.
I mean, to be honest, I sort of love that idea. I mean, I don't know if I would do it literally like that, but like, I mean, that's kind of one of my favorite things when you like interview someone and they're like, what's your like must-haves, which is kind of silly and corny sometimes. But I do like the idea of like, some design figure or somebody that you love their style, right? And they're just like, hey, here are some great brands that I love that you might not have heard of before. And you might align with that because you kind of like their style. They have interesting choices. It's sort of still a cool idea, I think.
No, I think so too. I wish that they would continue to do that because more and more, like there are so many, like you were talking about, makers and designers out there who have trouble reaching people because like in the sea of Instagram, how do you do that, right?
Welcome to my life.
Right? Well, much in the same way, like how in the early days of malls, no one knew what Banana Republic and stuff was. And so they needed the department store to draw them in. I think this is a way that like places like, Nordstrom or other department stores can stay relevant is by, uplifting up all of these independent and cool, interesting small businesses. Like I think there's still a place for it. And I think it's not too late for Macy's. I know Macy's has been doing, I don't know if they're doing this now because like everything's out the window, but they were doing these little shops in their shop too that were a different theme every month. I remember I went one month and it was like rainbow and they had products from all these small brands assorted by different colors of the rainbow. And I was like, this is really, really cool. Like we need.
But they have to bring that online presence though. I mean, you can't just do it in the store unless
right?
they're doing like, destination installation stuff where people are going to come. I mean, I hate to say this even, but make it like grammable and all that shit. That's a whole different thing. I mean, I still think that like you have to have it a strong presence of that online. So I could even just scroll through and be like, oh shit, like this is really cool. Maybe I would go see it in person if there's one downtown or something like that, But Macy's, it's funny. My mother-in-law is like really into Macy's. The first time I met her, it's very like, she's Thai, but it's a very like Chinese thing where she like met me, gave me an envelope, a red envelope, and it had a Macy's gift card in it. And I was like, oh, okay. It's just like a very like specific thing. But so I've gone to a few Macy's with her, but their online presence is like, they first of all have sales every day. I get an email. I mean, I should just unsubscribe, but now I'm just sort of fascinated by it. How many sales they have and stuff. And their website sort of sucks. And I'm also kind of like, I'm the kind of person that when something's too discounted, I'm like, but is this good quality? Like, you're getting to the point now where it's like bath towels are $6 each. I'm like, do I really want a $6 bath towel? Also, like, how are they making any money? So I just start questioning stuff like that. And for me personally, because of where I'm coming from, I love a deal in some sense, but I also like, there's relatively good deals that make me feel like, oh, okay, this is a deal that's reasonable and this is a deal that's not reasonable. And I don't know how this is like logistically working here, which makes me wonder if I even want that thing,
Well, okay. So it's interesting that you talk about like, how do they make any money? Like specifically, let's talk about Macy's, right? There were memes that were going around for a while, a few years ago, that were basically like, if you've ever bought anything full price at Macy's, you should be ashamed of yourself for the rest of your life, right? And it's true because often you can go in there and like everything's on sale and then there's like some other coupon on top of that and it's like confusing, which of course is how they get you to buy more stuff. But one thing that I've learned in my career is like the way that department stores manage their inventory and their like profitability is really, really weird and complicated. So like, I'll try to explain this the best I can, but like if you're running a regular old store, right, like a regular boutique or a high corporate level like buying role like I've had, you buy stuff, right? You mark it up. If it doesn't sell, you mark it down. You just make less money off of that, right? And that's pretty standard, right? And like, in the fast fashion era, more and more brands have realized, well, all brands really, all the big brands have realized that you have to sell stuff on sale because people don't want to pay full price because they got deal madness. So now, those brands will like literally, they'll say that dress is $60, but they know that it's only going to sell for $30. So they make sure that they're still making like a 3 times markup when it sells for $30, right? So we just get crappier stuff. Department stores do this different thing where with the brands they work with, and this is one of the reasons you don't see like a lot of new brands in department stores, because if you're a new brand, you cannot hang with a department store because they'll buy stuff from you. If it doesn't sell, you either need to take it back or you need to literally write them a check to cover their money they're going to lose by marking it down.
Oh.
So if you're a
that seems very old school.
I know. And it like if you're a small brand, it can be devastating.
Yeah,
To be
totally.
like, well, I sold you all those pants and now you want me to write a check. And this is the thing. In most cases, that check you're writing isn't like, okay, so the pants were $100. I sold them to you for $50. So you would make $50 off of every full price pants you sold. It's not like they were saying, okay, we're going to mark them down to $40. So now you need to give us $10 to make up that cost. No. They want you to make up that $50 that they would have made selling it at full price. So if they sell those pants for $50, which is what they paid for them, you need to pay them an additional $50 for every pair they sell.
Oh, so you need to make up for their loss.
Yes. I mean, that's a really simplified version of it. And there's a lot more nuance and negotiation. In most cases, you probably wouldn't end up giving them $50 for every pair of jeans, but you would give them something. And at the very least, it would be a significant discount off their next order.
Well, they're looking at it like probably like you're Joe Schmo nobody starting from the ground up or like a new brand or whatever. Like you're like they're in the power. They have the power to bring this product to the masses, right? That's how they look at it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so brands who are like most of their business comes from department stores, and that includes like someone like Nordstrom. The brands that sell to them are accustomed to dealing that way, which means, of course, it's kind of a similar thing that's happening with fast fashion retailers who know that you're going to buy everything on sale, so they just make cheaper stuff, so they, no matter what, make a lot of money. Brands have to do that too. So that pair of pants might be $100 and they might have sold it to Macy's for $50 or Nordstrom or whatever. But they planned all along that they might have to give half that money back to Macy's. So they made the clothes cheaper in the first place. And it's interesting because like my career as a buyer has been in, these like so-called specialty retailers. So ridiculous. Yeah. What a name. And so we don't operate with markdown money, right? And I remember specifically way back at ModCloth, there was a brand. It's like such a department store staple. It's called BB Dakota. That we would buy from at ModCloth, and they did a huge order for us, but like something was off about it, like the size or the color, and so it didn't really sell. And they were like, "Can we give you markdown money?" Like they were just like, "Please let us give you markdown money." And I was like, "We've never like done that before." And they were like, "We'll give you $10,000 or something." And I was like, "That sounds pretty cool." But then accounting reached out to me and was like, "We just got this $10,000 check from BB Dakota. Do you want me to just send it to you?" And I was like, "No, it's not for me." Okay.
You mean I'll take it, but
you have to deposit it or something. And they were like, "We don't know how. We've never done this before." And I was like, "Well, neither have I." Like, I don't know.
So, I mean, again, everything gets so complicated, It's like, part of me is like, you start thinking about making products and like, I mean, even now as myself, who's like a small business owner, and my biggest problem really is getting out to the right people, right? Mm-hmm. Getting eyes on me of people that are like, would be interested in what I'm making, whatever. And so like, when you're dealing with this kind of stuff too, where it's like, you have brands and then this department store is buying the brands so they can bring it to the people, and and how that all changes, it's just like, it gets really complicated. And I mean, part of me is like, I love that this, like, bringing things online, you can kind of go directly to who's making a lot of times, like what you're looking for, which is awesome. But finding them sometimes can be tricky. So this is like an interesting, structure and how that moves forward in a different world.
I know. I mean, this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately because I've been working on all these episodes about Etsy and eBay, and more and more big brands have been reaching out to different people in my friend circle about partnerships and stuff like that. And just like talking through, like, what do you do as a small maker to like grow your business without getting fucked over, right? It's really, really hard. That's why so many people stay with Etsy or eBay or whatever, even though like they're cutting into their profits. It's not very fair. They kind of have a monopoly on those businesses. So like you have to accept any increase in fees or any other nonsense policies that they put out there, even if they like hurt your business, because at least you get that exposure, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just still like, how is there a way we can create like a nonprofit co-op where everyone sells their stuff online and obviously there will be fees attached to it to pay the people who maintain the
Sure.
website and whatever else. But like, it wouldn't be like, we're going to make $1 billion in the next 2 years, which is what these kind of the promises that these companies
Right.
will sell, to like their investors. Like that's how Etsy goes awry. That's how eBay goes awry. I mean, honestly, like there was a time probably where Macy's was making crazy promises like that. And that's how they were able to bring in all this money and buy all these department stores,
Yep.
It's like,
Yeah. I mean, I think there's something to be said for it. I think you and I have talked about this a little bit. I would love, like, I keep using the word marketplace because it's just like, I don't know, an easy thing for me to like describe it sort of. But like, I mean, I guess in some ways kind of like a department store, but not really. But like this central place where you can go to that maybe has like an overall like themed vibe of like, just style wise or just like super interesting stuff or sustainable or kind of whatever, thing that kind of might draw you into like a group of brands. But like having a place where, people can come and look and discover other brands, but also keeping it like true to like the fact that like if you had that place, like say, I decided to launch like a marketplace, obviously you would need to get paid, right? It's like you're doing a service. And I think that's totally legit. I mean, I don't think that there's going to be like, as a small business, that those are kind of fees that you're going to have to deal with, like marketing or, doing stuff like that, where you're paying somebody to host this thing and bring people to it,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's fine. But there does become a point where that can get a little out of control,
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of room for that. I mean, I'm curious to see how that moves forward and like if there is somebody who really picks up that. Because I used to, when I worked at Alfie, I would get contacted by a lot of like marketplaces like Lulu in Georgia and like stuff like that. And, I never really like more furniture wise, I think there's some stuff like that, but I haven't really found one that I thought was interesting for clothes or like wearables.
Yeah, no, me neither. I was taught like at the end of last year, I talked on one of the episodes about how like that was an idea I had, something I wanted to work on this year was like creating a marketplace like that. And I was bombarded with messages from people who were like, oh, my friend's already doing that or this or that. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to be like out here stealing people's ideas. But then I haven't seen anything emerge. So
I haven't either. So if you're out there and you you've seen something like that, please let us know. Because I'm curious, like who's doing sort of interesting gathering of brands that would be, I don't know, that's something that we would be into and
like
seem
cool.
like,
and like, you could buy stuff from all these small makers and know that they're decent people and, like they have the best intentions and, they're trying their hardest to like be environmentally and socially responsible. Like there are some collectives for like sustainable fashion and whatnot, but it's not the same thing either. It's still much larger scale brands.
Yeah.
And I think right now it leaves a lot of makers with like either Etsy or like trying to make it on their own on their website. And it's really, really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah. And it's also interesting too, because I feel like and I would love to have a little bit of a vetted process with that too, where that like, okay, this is a real, because sometimes, I mean, I've had friends, multiple people tell me lately they've gotten scammed too, which is also a whole other thing.
No doubt.
But like, vetted people, not only just to know that they're a legit business, but like, also people who make quality stuff, because there are a lot of young makers out there who are, just dabbling and like trying to make things and seeing how it turns out. And like, that's cool. And there's a place for you in the world. But I also don't know if I'm like necessarily always looking for that. Like it's like this little sort of sweet spot of like small businesses that are like professional, kind of have their shit together. They're growing. They make quality things. They have like a sense of like, ethics about how they're doing this. And this having a little bit of vetting would be nice too. So you kind of weed through all the stuff and you're like, is this a real business or is this like someone who's just like in college doing this for fun on the side, which is totally cool. But, I don't know, just like gathering people in a different way would be interesting.
I think so too. I mean, I'm still thinking about this. Like, honestly, if I don't see anything like this emerge by the end of this year, I'm going to make it happen next year.
And also there can be multiples. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
like,
totally.
This is not like, also, so if someone's doing this is not like the only person who ever had this idea. I mean, this is a pretty,
right.
As we're talking about department stores. I mean, in some sense, I mean, people have been talking about this forever. It's not like, but I do think in in this time, as we shift in the way that we shop and things, there's room for that. There might be one online, but you're like, that's not really the vibe we're going for. We would kind of want something more like this or whatever. So there's room there, I think.
No, I think it'd be really cool. I mean, I'm my head is already spinning with this idea of it being sort of like a co-op. And so everybody who sells on that platform also gets a buy-in on who gets to sell on the platform. So like, you know, you have to have a majority approval to bring in new brands and stuff. I think that's good too, because it creates this sense of community and ownership. And, you know, like, once again, there would obviously be fees and stuff attached to it, but like that money would just be for marketing and paying all the staff.
That's
like,
totally reasonable. I mean,
yeah,
the reality, and people get so mad when they're like, I mean, talking about Instagram, even with like, you know, the end of the day, I mean, Instagram is a free app. Okay. And like, as a business owner, I would probably be okay with paying a small monthly fee to be a business owner on Instagram if things were to change a little bit on how they presented stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because people are like, you know, and it is frustrating when you're on this like free app and like that's where we kind of communicate and like, you know, that's sort of a place where we gather. And at the same time, they change things and make it crazy and harder for us or whatever, which is fine. But it's also like, it's a free app. We have to figure out how to move forward in a way that like we as a business owner may have to pay a small fee for something. And I personally think that's okay if it's working for us and it's the right structure and it's the right, you know, kind of thing that's like will be fair for all of us, you know?
Totally. I mean, it's like, as it is right now, it's just not fair.
No,
like it's just like not the right platform because it comes from a really different place in terms of both like ethics and its own model, its own financial model. And there's a lot of pressure on Instagram right now to make up a lot of revenue because Facebook is not making a lot of money. I mean, Facebook is just it's fallen so far out of favor, depending on who your customer is, you know?
Right.
And so I you know, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Instagram. I think we all rely on it a lot. I know I do for reaching people. Otherwise, literally no one would know who I am at all.
Yeah, me too,
so I'm grateful for Facebook. I mean, for Instagram.
Yeah, me too.
Well, you know, Macy's, we went on a really long tangent, but like a really important one, actually. I think it kind of talks about like everything we discussed kind of mirrors what has happened with department stores versus specialty stores. Now they're both kind of like off and not very popular anymore. Macy's closed 52 stores in 2010. It closed 5% of its stores in 2016. It closed 30 stores in 2020, 45 this year. There's a goal of closing 125 stores by 2023. They're laying off people right and left. They cut 2,000 corporate jobs last year. I mean, it's like, I feel like I look at Macy's and I see all of these other like the startups, you know, and how they got greedy and failed too. Yeah. Or maybe they haven't failed yet, but they certainly have their customers or sellers feel betrayed, you know?
Definitely.
This is like Macy's was like the original girl boss or something. It's just like, what a weird time. And then, okay, so like you mentioned Lord & Taylor, which a few years ago, Le Tote. Do you know what Le Tote is?
I don't think so.
It's a clothing rental service. I first became aware of it because my sister Kelly used it for a long time. You know, you pay a membership fee and every month you get like, I don't know, 5-6 items and you keep them for a month. You can keep them and pay for them or send them back. And Le Tote was doing really well at this time. Like I remember this period because it was right around the time I took my job with a rental company, a different rental company. And this was like the entire fashion industry was like, rental's the future. Don't worry about the retail apocalypse. It's all about rental. And so like Ann Taylor was doing rental and New York and Company was doing rental, like anyone. So Le Tote had this big inflated valuation. Probably there was a time when Macy's had that too, right? And so Le Tote was able to get the financing to buy Lord & Taylor. And it was always a really confusing decision to me, but I guess the conceit there was that you could then, one, Le Tote could rent out Lord & Taylor clothing, right? And you could go to a Lord & Taylor to like drop off your Le Tote or try things on. I don't think that ever came to fruition because then Le Tote declared bankruptcy.
What year was this, roughly?
Le Tote declared bankruptcy in 2020.
Okay, so this is relatively recent.
Yes, it's pretty recent. I want to say Le Tote bought Lord & Taylor in 2018 or 2019. The other thing that's going on with Le Tote is that Le Tote is suing Urban Outfitters for stealing its intellectual property.
Shocker.
and launching Nuuly. Because basically the background story there is that Latote approached Urban Outfitters about buying them because, and this is pre-Latote buys Lord & Taylor, right? This is like a couple years before that. So Latote approached Urban Outfitters about buying them, and they were interested because, like, any retailer at this point is like, what are other ways we can save our business? Because people are just less interested in a lot of these like traditional retailers. And at this point, there was already a lot of whispering that rental was the future. There were only a few people doing it out there. It was like Latote and Rent the Runway for the most part. So, you know, Urban puts together a team of people to go out to Latote and learn all about it, do the due diligence, which is what you would do when you were going to buy any company. And, you know, obviously I'm not in the room when any of this has happened. This is just based on what I've read. Latote was under the impression that Urban Outfitters was going to buy them. Like, the team spent a significant amount of time out in, I want to say, San Francisco, in the Latote offices, doing the due diligence, learning how they did things and all this stuff. The team leaves and goes back to, you know, Urban Outfitters headquarters, and Latote's under this impression that the deal's about to be signed. What happens is Urban Outfitters says no. 6 months, a year later, they start their own rental service, Nuuly. So Latote sued them. They were basically like, you stole all of our systems, operations, processes, our whole model. I know that Urban tried to get the case dismissed, but this year, a judge, just a couple months ago, a judge here in Pennsylvania was like, nope, keep going. This is a real case. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But at the same time, Latote is in bankruptcy right now. I mean, they're still operating, but like, they're in a weird time financially. They probably should not have bought Lord & Taylor. I'm sure they are regretting that.
Yeah, I feel like, too, like, I'm sure this is not Urban's first lawsuit. I mean, I know many, even just small artists who have been completely, like, literally just ripped off by them. I mean, anyone, you know, especially in the mid 2000s, I like just everyone was like, no, don't do, like, because you'd be like, you know, like going back to what you were saying too, with like these department stores or big retail, like sort of holding the power, and you as like a small brand thinking like, oh, I got to do this because this is going to be great. This is going to put me on the map. But what they do is they'll just like buy a little bit of it, and then they don't renew with you, and they just make them themselves. Things like that. And it's just like, oof, it's brutal. So I'm sure this is not their first lawsuit rodeo.
That idea, I mean, I think that's something really important to point out, which I don't think I've talked about in the show before. And yesterday I did an Instagram live about,
I caught a little bit of that. Yeah.
Brands reaching out about partnerships. So that's something that I didn't mention. And I wish I could go back in time and add that like often if you're a small brand and a big retailer comes to you and wants to buy your line, and they actually like goes forward as planned, you get paid on time, the product sells, it's really good. Oftentimes they're going to stop ordering from you and start making it themselves. Yeah. And that is like the name of the game. I've worked everywhere I've worked. That is exactly what happens.
Yeah.
And so there is a short lifespan on any partnership you're going to have with any of those brands.
Right.
And there's a ceiling on how much it's going to do for you.
Right.
And I think that's really important. And I'm mad at myself for not remembering that. But I can think of like hundreds of times in my career where I have seen this happen. It's happened with small brands and it's happened with medium-sized brands.
Yeah.
Those retailers don't owe you shit. That's how they look at it, because you are never going to have enough money to take them to court. Latote apparently is the only company that can hold a big retailer accountable.
I'm curious to see how that pans out. I'll have to keep that on the lookout.
I mean, if you read, I think there's like a good, it's either the Business of Fashion or the Fashion Law had a really good write-up about it that I read recently about the most recent update with the case. And I mean, it sounds like a very, very strong case. I don't know what that means happens. Like, that's the thing. Like, what does like Urban Outfitters have to write a check to Latote if they lose? Like, I don't know what happens, you know? But it seems like a very strong case.
Interesting.
Yeah, but for every Latote actually takes someone to court and holds them accountable, there are hundreds and hundreds of artists and brands who have been scammed by other big brands who can't. I mean, lawyers are expensive.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it sucks. Someone was messaging me today and they were like, what do you do if Shein steals your ideas? And I'm like, well, not much. You know, like the best you can do is just blow it up all over the internet and hope that gets you new customers.
Yeah.
That's
like
it.
Tuesday Best,
Because-
and that was like it probably like put her on the map, honestly.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, not really. I mean, she was doing stuff before, but just like really like brought attention to that, and she had like a big voice, and people were like, "Oh shit!" When Zara just basically started taking her ideas and making them themselves, like pins and things, and
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's one of the best things about social media is like you get to hear these stories because those stories no one would know them if this happened in like 2000. And I can
like
assure
Diet
you,
Prada and stuff are there.
Yeah, exactly. In 2000 and even 2010, plenty of retailers were stealing designs and ideas right and left, but it was just harder to get the information out there.
Yeah.
So at least, Instagram has its drawbacks, but also has many positive attributes.
Of course. There's always a mixed bag,
This Saturday only, 8 a.m. to midnight. It's the one-day sale at May Company for 16 hours only. Save 25% on every sweater for Mrs. and Juniors. Every corded make jacket is 60% off. Save 55 to 65% on a collection of pearls and 14-karat gold. Members-only basic jackets are just $36.98 and save 33% on toys and all Tremetry Shop items. 16 hours of savings. You can't afford to miss the one-day sale. This Saturday only, 8 a.m. to midnight at May Company.
This is it, the fashion excitement for Fall 85. The tones, the textures, the total look. It's Liz Claiborne, and you'll find it at Boston Store. Color's the story, and Claiborne is vibrant. She's Liz Sport, making a splash this fall in a weekend collection that's relaxed and easy. Or discover Liz Claiborne in Liz Wear, a casual collection that's big news this fall. Colorful, spirited, and ready for fun. Claiborne also redefines your career look this fall with Liz Spectator. Lustrous knits in a palette of bold, rich colors, sumptuous fabrics and softly draped silhouettes, and classic winter whites and navies of understated elegance. It's a relaxed attitude that means beautiful business. A perfect sense of style, impeccably tailored and totally feminine. Liz Sport, Liz Wear, and Liz Spectator. 3 distinctive collections that reflect Liz Claiborne for Fall 85. And you'll find them all at Boston Store.
Estee Lauder Skincare, Estee Lauder Makeup, Estee Lauder Fragrance. All in our free gift to you. It's a special collection filled with 5 makeup, fragrance, and skincare products, including Night Repair and Luscious Cream Mascara. It's your bonus with any Estee Lauder purchase of $12.50 or more. Estee Lauder, live in our world. This gift is yours through February 18th at Gayfers.
Well, do you have any exciting department store stories?
I mean, this one was sort of a dark one, but I did, I was thinking about like department store stuff, and I realized I was like, God, I did spend a lot of time, as we've been talking about, like in department stores growing up. It was like back to school clothes, proms, getting fights with my mom there, going with girlfriends.
So many.
Like, I just remember like, I was thinking about the feeling of being in a department store, just like, and it actually makes me feel like weird now because there was so much like drama that had happened in my life that happened in a department store. It was just like fight with my mom, and she's like, "Well, I'll meet you at the car." It's like that kind of shit. I feel like went down a lot. But I did have some serious drama that went down when I was 15. I was going through a bit of a rough patch in my life, I think, and I started stealing. Just not really like stealing, but like I did my first, like, I'm going to try to steal something. And I had gone to the mall, gone to one of the department stores. I think it might've been JCPenney, but I don't remember which brand it was. And I went in, I think I was by myself, and I just like put on a jacket, and I was just like, oh, I didn't even think about it. It wasn't like I was planning. I just was like, I'm going to walk out with this jacket. Walked out with a jacket and got away with it. And I was like, oh my God. And I was kind of like, I was generally a good kid, to be quite honest, but I just had this like moment, stole the jacket. So then I told all my friends, I was like, oh my God, like I took this jacket. It was so cool. Like so stupid. But we went back the next weekend, and it was me and like 4 of my girlfriends, and we were in like a department store dressing room, and the bras and panties, like lingerie section, putting on all this stuff. So we basically just put on a ton of bras and panties, making a total scene. I mean, anyone who was working there, any sales associate would have been like, what the fuck are these girls doing? It was just ridiculous. We were so obvious and like stupid. Like we thought we were being cool, and we were not. It was just a mess. So we all put on some clothes, under our stuff, and went to go walk out. And I had one girlfriend who didn't participate because her parents owned retail stores and she felt weird about it, which I totally get. I was like, good for you. It was smart. But as we were walking out, I had a hand on my shoulder and it was just like, mall security, like, come with me. And I was like, oh, fuck. And my friend was like, why didn't you run? I was like, I wasn't going to run. Like, where am I going to go? Anyway, so I got pulled to the back room of the department store, you know, like when you don't see all those back tunnel, like, you know, offices and stuff like that. So we got pulled in there and she was like, and I was the one who really brought down the whole crew because she was like, I was like, oh, I'm sorry. We'll just give it back. Like, we're just being idiots. And she was like, yeah, but I saw you in here last week. And I was like, damn it. So I was the one, the bad seed that really screwed everybody because they had seen me last week. Because it wasn't like, oh, we've never done this before. We're just big dumb idiots. Like, I'm so sorry. We'll never do it again. It was like, she was like, yeah, but she was in here last week. And I was like, fuck. So I was the, you know, the bad child who got everyone in trouble. So they took us, they put us in a car, went to the police department. I think I blacked out.
God, I would have pooped my pants.
Yeah,
this
it was
like
very
really scary.
And
yeah.
as I have mentioned on the podcast before, I mean, I had a very intense mother. You know what I mean? Like, this was not like a mother who'd be like, why did you do that? Let's talk about it. It was like shit was going to go down. So I got in a police car. It was 3 of us because my one friend didn't get arrested because she was outside the dressing room. And they knew that she wasn't really a part of it. Went down to the Trumbull Police Department, went into one of those, you know, rooms, like waiting, called my dad. My dad came down and I'll never forget. I like walked. My dad's like a pretty chill guy. I mean, he's, you know, he can get like pissy if you're really an asshole, but pretty much he's, you know, he's a pretty reasonable person. And I was like crying. I was like, Dad, oh my God. And he was like, save the tears, get on the phone right now, call these 2 friends of yours and tell them not to say a word about this because I could get kicked out of school. I went to private school. And so if they found out I was arrested, I could have been kicked out of school and it would have been a huge disaster. So called my 2 girlfriends. We had a whole plan. We're not going to talk about it. You know, I didn't even ask if I was grounded. I was just like, I am not allowed out of my room for any the foreseeable future. But luckily, I mean, we were also 15. You know, we weren't hurting anybody. Like, we definitely were idiots and, you know, being stupid. But one of my girls that I got caught with, her dad was a cop in a different town. So he called the police department and was like, hey, you know, they're young girls, they're 15, they know they've messed up, we're going to, you know, so they didn't like press any charges or anything like that. I think the mall security was just like, whatever, they just, you know. So we didn't have any like charges pressed against us, which was great because I didn't have to deal with that part of it. But yeah, I had my mom wasn't home when my dad had gotten the call to come down to the police department. So when I got home, shit got real dark. My mom was like, where have you guys been? And my dad was like, well, just had to pick up your daughter from the police station. And it was like all hell broke loose. I basically had to like run up into my room and like lock myself in my room so it didn't go down and get worse. And it was, I'll spare everyone the dark details, but yeah, it was not great. The next morning was not great. Probably one of the worst mornings of my life. And yeah, and so that was my big drama. It ended up being okay, you know, whatever, generally speaking. Like, I didn't, you know, my mom was crazy. But other than that, like, I didn't get, you know, they didn't press any charges. I didn't get kicked out of school. And I've never stolen again. Like, I was definitely like scared straight.
Yeah.
But it was one of those experiences you like almost like leave your body because you're like, oh my God.
I mean, I was like frightened listening to this story.
Yeah.
Like, I have goosebumps. I was chilled.
Yeah. It was a tough one.
I never did the shoplifting, although I had tons of friends who did because my mom would have like literally murdered me.
Yeah.
Like, my mom was super crazy and was like kind of waiting for me to get in trouble so I could prove that I was the monster that she assumed I was. But one of my friends went through a really, really wild shoplifting phase. I want to say like 9th grade. And I remember at her peak, she stole an entire Clinique tester like module from the Clinique counter, you know, with like lipsticks and eyeshadows and everything in it. I don't know how she got it out of the mall.
That's a pretty like high level steal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Was like
yeah.
I mean, I didn't say this to her face, but I was like, to other friends, I was like, I'm really concerned. Like, she's going to end up in prison because like, you can't just go steal from like a whole tester station from like the makeup counter. Like, you're asking for it at this point. Like, you're gonna get called. Like, you're getting too bold. Fortunately, then she stopped. I don't know if maybe she got caught and we didn't like hear about it. But I remember her being like, what, you guys don't want any of these lipsticks or eyeshadows? And we were like, no, they're like
Yeah.
testers. She was like,
Yeah, there's
well,
that
that's
too.
all mine. And we were like, good luck like having that in your bedroom and your parents not noticing.
Right. I mean, there's a different, that's why I was thinking for us, it was definitely like, you know, I think I didn't even think about it as me being bad. I was just like, you kind of like checked out, and I just was like, oh, I'm going to put this on. You know, I wasn't thinking about consequences. I was just like, ooh, this is kind of weird and exciting. You weren't hurting anybody. You were just like,
yeah.
Okay. And then, you know, I'm actually kind of grateful that in some ways I got arrested, because it just was a wake up call. I was like, you can't do this. This is not chill. Like, get your shit together. You know what I mean? Like, and I was like, oh, right. Okay. And because I didn't even think about it. I was just like a dumb kid, like acting out and like, you know, excited to do something cool and weird, you know?
Totally. I mean, there's like so much psychology around shoplifting, especially when you become an adult.
Right.
I think often when you're a kid, you just like have no concept of the consequences.
Right.
But I've definitely had friends who have admitted to me like, yeah, I'm like 35 years old and I have a shoplifting problem.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, plot twist, I've dealt with that with my own mother, you know?
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I've done a lot of research about like, people who are, I guess, kleptomaniacs or whatever they call them. Is that a real thing? I don't know if it's like a clinical diagnosis, but people who steal not for necessity, because stealing for necessity is a whole other thing. But people who steal like that do not need the things that they steal, it's just like more of like, I don't call it sport or whatever, a compulsion. It's actually kind of rare, which I was sort of surprised about. I mean, it obviously exists but it's not as common as you think. People that are stealing mostly are stealing for necessity, I think. But yeah, it's like, there's like whole compulsiveness to it. And I've read a little bit I mean, it's really kind of interesting. I don't know if that's the right word, but about like why people do that and the reasons behind it, the psychology behind it. Yeah. So
interesting. I did have one boyfriend who I've talked about in the department who was like a major, like definitely a kleptomaniac, like just couldn't stop stealing and stole all day, every day, everywhere he went. Like if we went out for lunch, he would just steal all the condiments.
Yeah.
You know, like he stole a trash can from a restaurant bathroom.
But like,
why? Day.
You need the trash can? You know what I mean? That's the thing. It's
I know.
When it comes down to that, it's like my mom will do that too. Even I have family members that were like old, like my old Greek side, like my great aunts. And they would like at the restaurant, it's like take the you know, biscuits and wrap them up, put it in their pocket I'm like, you don't need to do that. Like, why? And I think it's also a generational thing. Like if you live through the Depression, people like, there's always, even though you have things now, you still have this feeling like you're going to lose everything and you want to like hoard it up and make sure you're, you know, so you can survive. And like, must be some like PTSD from that kind of stuff.
I don't know. I feel like I'm going to be honest. I feel like I'm turning into a Depression era Nana. The last year and a half has really put me in that headspace where I'm always like, I better drink every last drop of this LaCroix because it might be my last, you know, like I just am like, I'm not laughing, but I'm like, you know, I found myself, I mean, first off, like I, you know, hate waste from like an environmental perspective.
Me too, yeah.
Like last summer specifically, I remember Dylan and Dustin would constantly leave like half drank cans of seltzer all over the house. And I would just go around and drink them all, even though they were flat and warm, because I didn't want them to be wasted.
Yeah.
And like, I just, I can see myself. I constantly am like, well, we better enjoy the good times while they last because they're not here much longer. And I'm like,
we're all turning into Depression era Nanas. Yeah.
I know. I'm like, where did I get this from?
I'm with you on the waste. Like even my partner's always like, well, I know you don't like, because I like with food and stuff, I try not to make too much, or like I'll freeze stuff. So I don't want to throw stuff in the trash. I do feel like there's that waste element for me, but I also feel like, yeah, I mean, I think that like for me coming from a household there, it was very clean. There was no, when I say hoardery, it wasn't like dirty hoardery. It was just like stockpile, like the end of the world. Like we would have like, I mean, still to this day, you can have like 15 rolls of paper towels in the house. You know, 3 cases of soda, 2 cases of seltzer. And I think it's a little bit of a suburban thing. Like you can just like stock it up in your basement or your, you know, garage. But I like hated that as a kid. Cause like we would go to the store and get a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, can't we get like 2 bottles of soda? Why do we have to get 8? You know, because they're on sale. We got to get them in. And it's like, so I think there's partially, I don't like wasting just on an environmental tip, but also there's part of me that's just like, I like to keep it tight and like not minimal. I like to feel like I have things, but like, you know, just not overbuying. I feel like it weighs me down to have all these things that I have to like then manage and deal with, you know? So I think there's a little bit of that. I just kind of like to keep it tight and not overly indulgent in all these things that I don't really necessarily need.
Well, wait till you move out of the city. Then you're going to be like, I'll get the biggest package of toilet paper. That's where it starts. You're like, oh my God, we didn't have to buy toilet paper for 6 months. That was great. We should do that kind of thing more often.
I mean, if you're gonna use it, listen, I get it. Like, but I just would like, I think it was more like as a kid, I was always embarrassed. Like when we'd check out and we'd have literally, my mom there would be like a soda that she like would be on sale. So she would buy 20 of them. And I'm like, oh my God, like, why do we?
One of my stepfathers was like that. Oh my gosh.
It drives me crazy. But I have to say, even pandemic times, because we couldn't go out, especially in the beginning when we were really tight about going out, you know, I was like, well, I don't want to ever feel like we don't have like food and drinks and things in the house. So we were definitely buying like more bulk, you know, suburban style, like seltzers and stuff like that. So now I've become accustomed to that a little bit. So I like to have like a plethora of like the basics that I like around.
No, that's interesting because we obviously had to do the same thing, especially like in Philly for most of the pandemic. I mean, it's still happening, so I can't speak to it now. But for like the times when we were still living in Philly, the grocery stores in the city just didn't have much.
Yeah.
You know? And so we would start going over the bridge to Jersey every few weeks. You know, it'd be like our one big trip, and we would stock up on like, you know, we needed 3 meals a day and like anything we were going to drink or need to clean or feed the animals or anything. So it was like, it would be this like, oh my God, our whole car is filled to like the roof with stuff. And it felt really uncomfortable for me to have all that stuff in my house. Like I was like, I feel like I'm surrounded by stuff. Like it would be a relief when we were almost out of things because I felt like the space had returned.
Yeah.
But it's like we had to do that. And I do think that like I have reached that stage now where I've developed a comfort with it.
Yeah.
And it does concern me where I'm like, we only have 1 case of LaCroix left. What's going to happen? I'm so thirsty, you know? And like just things like that. Like we only have 1 bag of cat litter. What if we run out and there's no more? And Dustin will be like, there'll be more. There'll be more cat litter. It'll be okay. And I'm like, but there wasn't that one time. You know, like, what are we going to do? We're going to put the cats outside. What we're going to do, you know?
Well, I had one moment in the early pandemic about that where it was like the first one and only day, like kind of early on that I had oh my God, there's not going to be deliveries of food to, especially in like city area, you know, where I'm like, everyone's going to buy up all this stuff. So I bought like cans of beans and stuff, you know, so I had my 1 day panic and then I like relaxed. I mean, David even bought a bidet because he was like, I'm not messing with this TP bullshit.
Oh, we have one too because of the pandemic.
He wanted it. I mean, you know, when we travel through South, he sort of like likes the efficiency of that. And I actually agree. I'm like, that's cool, you know? But so we like got that, but like now I've like settled down a little bit and I'm like, okay, like it's going to be okay. it's not like end of the world, like whatever. But I also do think that like, especially if you have room for it, which I barely do now, but especially if we moved or something, you know, having like some seltzers and like basics that you use often, I think that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that's like unhealthy, like to buy like 2 cases of seltzer to have in the house, or if you have someone over, I just like seltzer. So like, I'm going to drink that. That stuff is fine. I'm just saying stuff that you don't really need that you're buying on sale was like a thing that my mom did a lot. So, you know, like, and she's like a very tidy collector / hoarder, where she'll take like bags from the store. Like, why do you need that many bags? You know what I mean? Like the like grocery bags, stuff like that. That feels more compulsive, and it's not about, oh, you know what? I'm actually going to really use these things, because she'll forget she has them, and then I'll find them like 4 years later. You know?
Yeah.
So
I mean, I definitely have conversations with Justin like that when we're out in the wild, where I'm like, no, that's not coming home.
Yeah.
What are you going to, the game is like, what are you going to do with that?
Yes. And if you will use it, then okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And some collectors and people are like, if he's into like like David's into like music stuff or bird, I'm like, okay, if you're going to actually use this thing, that's totally fine to bring it, especially when thrifting, because everything can be cheap and you're just like, sure.
Get it
if
all,
we're not going to use it, or we don't have a place for it, I'm just like, I have to be more mindful of what I bring in.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Well, do you have anything else to say about department stores?
I will just say one little side hot tip. Not really a hot tip, but if you're looking for a little department store visual, like porn or whatever you want to call it, Mad Men had that great couple episodes where Don Draper like kind of has a moment with this woman who runs a department store in Manhattan, and they said, I was actually checking it out, and it was a debate whether it was in the show it was called Menken's department store.
Yeah.
And it was like that heyday of the department store in Manhattan, like where you come and it was glamorous and sexy and whatever. And so there was a debate online whether it was supposed to be a Bergdorf Goodman or a Henry Bendel. People were like, I think it was a Henry Bendel, just kind of more of the vibe. But people were chatting about, whether what it was supposed to represent. But if you're looking for a little like fun visual on like the heyday of department stores, that would be a good couple episodes to check out. I forget what season it is, but you can just Google it. It's the Menken's department store.
Yeah, I think it's really early on. I think it might be in the first season.
First or second. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, when Dustin and I got married, I found out that he'd never watched Mad Men.
Oh.
He's like, I don't really like when I hear something's popular, I just assume I don't like it, which is like the most hipster thing you could ever say. And we were in Japan, and like the only things available on Netflix were basically things not in English and Mad Men. And I was like, oh my God, this is a great opportunity for you to watch Mad Men. And so we've rewatched it in the past few years.
Did he like it?
Yeah, he loved it. Yeah. I was like, I told you so. Same thing with, oh my God, Breaking Bad. He'd never watched that either.
Right.
And we watched that last summer, and he was like, okay.
I mean, Mad Men is just whether you liked it or thought. I've heard people say, oh, it's boring or whatever. I'm like, okay, you didn't get it, but whatever. But if just on a visual tip, if you're a decade nerd or into anything like that, like they just, the art department crushed that show. It was just I mean, down to like, I've read like, articles and stuff about it, and how like the hair and makeup people like had the women on the show like kind of doing their own, they would teach them how to do their own hair so it looked more real, and like their nails and everything, like all the details about like products, like they had people like researching the products and like creating the Lucky Strike boxes that he used to use for his cigarettes, and like it was just such a like high level amazing like art production. So just on that tip alone, if you're into that sort of thing, I mean most people probably listening to this have watch Mad Men, but
I hope so.
That's my
Let's
Mad
get
Men
more people
plot.
to watch it. Also, it's a really good lesson about toxic masculinity.
Correct.
The story arc actually with the woman, I think her name is Rachel, who like runs the Menken's department store. Actually, on my second viewing, like made me tear up. It's very moving. You can like really feel. It's very emotionally charged. Anyway,
she's a great actress. She was also on Sons of Anarchy, which is very different vibe.
Very different vibe. I think about that show a lot, actually. I have like recurring dreams about it.
Really? Why?
Yeah.
Because his butt was so cute?
I mean, real talk.
Yeah.
I mean, sexy main character, and Katie Siegel's in it.
Yes, she's amazing in it.
Yeah.
It's a tough show, though. If you're a delicate person, I would just warning on that. It was very violent and very intense, but it was really good.
Yeah, I couldn't rewatch it too hard, and I think that's why I have weird dreams about it, because it was so emotionally intense to watch.
It was for sure.
So are you working on any cool stuff that you'd like to plug right now?
I am. Well, I just launched some hats that went off very well. So I'm basically taking vintage, really cool vintage florals and different like vintage fabrics, and I'm making baseball style hats, classic hats. So I'm going to have a whole other, I'm working with a new person for production on that. So I'm hoping that all goes well, and we will have another batch coming out hopefully in the next month or two. And I'm also launching a collaboration I did with Gentle Thrills, which I don't know, some of you guys may know her. Issa, she's out in LA. She's a really amazing artist. She does a lot of airbrushing work as well. So we did these crazy like psychedelic mushroom robes sort of vibe. They're totally bonkers and like insane looking, but awesome. So she spray painted all the panels and then sent them back to me, and I've like constructing them and making these like insane robes. So those will be coming out in the next like week or so. I just have to photograph them and like finish that up. But yeah, there's a lot of exciting things happening.
Oh, and you people can buy your collars on New Works.
Yeah, that was well. Speaking of, actually, it was an interesting little tie-in with that because we're talking about like small brands working with bigger companies and feeling New Works is an amazing company, and I was really lucky to have hooked up with them because they are kind of on the large end of small. I think I would kind of categorize them as that, and so they had checked in with me and like loved my collars. And so we sold some of my collars just with the fabrics that I made on their website. And then I actually was talking to them about doing like a little bit of like a sustainable collection where they would send me all their scraps of their amazing prints that they make with like a lot of different artists. And they did that. And those came out awesome. People are really excited about that. So it's all their prints, the scraps that they don't use when they're making their garments. They sent me like a box of that and I made a bunch of collars. So you could do like really fun collars, like matchy layered on like their dresses or their shirts and like have a matching collar with it. So that's been really fun. And they're an amazing company and an example of someone who's doing it right, who's, you know, like supporting artists. Every season they work with a few different artists and make prints with them and pay them for that. And then they produce these prints in like their collection of silhouettes that are really like size inclusive and really great to like, just like, you know, very wearable and like easy to wear kind of clothes. So they're a great group of people. I really like them. And I'm really excited to kind of be part of that world with them a little bit. So that was been
I'm
great.
excited for it. I think that's so cool. I love New Works, and I feel like they like have been lifting up artists and giving them a platform for so long. So I hope they can expand that. And I feel really excited to know someone personally who's part of that.
Yeah.
You
It's
know?
been great. And like every time, I mean, they have such a loyal following, and anytime they, you know, post about the stuff we're doing together, I get like a ton of new followers and people who are excited, who've also come to me and ordered like custom stuff. So it's been great. And that's an example of like, you know, a little bit bigger company, you know, doing things right and trying to like, you know, don't be an asshole.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Well, thank you as always. This was such a delight, Jenny, and I'm already planning that we're going to do an episode about malls. I got really excited.
Yes. Definitely can do some mall stuff.
Oh, definitely. That's going to be like a 6-hour episode.
Yeah, I know. It's like, it'll just be its own series. Like,
yeah, seriously. Thanks again to Jenny for dropping by for a very fun conversation. Even just recording this cheered me up so much. I have a feeling that she will be back very soon for some mall talk, and I can't wait for that. Literally this morning, I was looking at vintage pictures of malls and just getting so excited. In the meantime, you can find Jenny on Instagram at Late to the Party People, and I'll share a link to her Instagram profile and her website in the show notes. Thanks for listening to this episode of Clotheshorse, researched, written, recorded, and edited by me, Amanda Lee McCarty. If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review on Apple Podcasts, and please tell a friend. If you would like to support my work here on Clotheshorse, please consider becoming a patron. You can learn more at patreon.com/clotheshorsepodcast. You can also make a one-time contribution via Venmo to @crystal_visions. Thanks, as always, to Dustin Travis White for our music and audio support. Bye.